Backlogs. Am I right? So, addressing the elephant in the room... yeah, I know. I'm bad at YouTube. I still don't know who Algorithm is, or what he wants with me. But we're doing this video anyway. Why, you ask? Well, there's a short answer and a long answer. Long answer, in years past, and with some consistency, I like to put out end-of-year roundup videos, what I used to probably call top 10 games of the year, then year in review, whatever else you want to call them. Personally, I try to drift away from calling them top 10s because I don't play nearly enough new releases per year for a sufficiently broad view like that. Instead, all I can do is rank what games I did play and talk about them. You know, I like to talk about video games. Big surprise. And it was always kind of a fun end of year or start of the following year tradition. Until that is 2022 and the behemoth Elden Ring focused video, which I think both Sam and I were really invested in. We put way too much thought and honestly stress, and we wanted to get a real broad view. We played through that game 5 or 6 times each, probably more since then. And, you know, obviously we had some takes that I think are justified and have held up quite well. You know, Elden Ring's not a completely perfect game. There are certainly annoying things about it. Anyway, we're getting off track. Point is though, despite all that stress and time and effort we put in, it got 6 views. So I just decided, fuck it, I'm not doing this anymore. And I gave the next year or two a skip. But honestly, halfway through 2025, I suddenly realized I'd actually played quite a lot of games from the previous year. Honestly, more than my average. And some of them, I certainly found I had things that I wanted to talk about. At the same time, I was wrapping up the Resistance retrospective, which had been taking up all of my free time until then, but with that reaching the finish line, I figured, fuck it, why not? Let's go back to 2024 and have a look through all the games that I played in a good old-fashioned roundup of my 2024 catalogue, whether it gets views or not. Oh, and short answer, because I didn't want to put myself through Dragon Age Veilguard and not get any content out of it. And with that, let's begin. Alright, I have a confession. In years past, in my self-imposed rush to hit that 10 game minimum for these videos, there would be times where I'd talk about a game without fully playing it. Sometimes, not even close. The Witcher 3, which I hate to say has still never grabbed me past the prologue. Batman Arkham Knight. Genuinely don't think I booted that game up a second time. And I've always felt a bit guilty about this, you know, and I have strived more and more ever since to finish games when I actually start them, to really take in everything they have to offer. LEGO Horizon Adventures is the game that finally taught me that no, actually, it's perfectly fine to drop a game on its ass once it's clear that it has nothing else to give you. I like the Horizon games. I know it's one of those series that has become popular to beat on in recent years, but I don't give a fuck. I like them. I like LEGO. Who the fuck doesn't? I quite like LEGO games. They're never brilliant, in my opinion, but they're basically never a bad time. I even rather like Horizon LEGO, what little there is out there. All of this is to say that all the pieces were there, pun intended, for me to love this game. I fucking hated LEGO Horizon Adventures. What a gulf in contrast between how goddamn stunning the visuals are, the beautiful environmental design, and really high quality, basically like LEGO movie level plasticky detail, and how completely hollow and empty it is in pretty much every other regard. Level after level of the same repetitive shit. All but just the same objective again and again and again. Imagine if every level in LEGO Star Wars was just the initial Trade Federation ship, but like they changed the colour of the walls each time. That's the experience of playing LEGO Horizon Adventures. For lack of a better description, it feels like the developers at Studio Gobo min-maxed their stats to entirely focus on making the best damn looking LEGO game I've ever seen, but completely neglected everything else. First impressions were actually really quite good on the back of these incredible visuals alone, putting the previous slate of Traveller's Tales LEGO games to shame by comparison, with environments in those games typically just mushy, pseudo-realistic recreations of whatever franchise we're tackling that day, with only the characters and directly interactable objects being rendered as LEGO. Not here! Everything from water to dirt to buildings and even special effects have been fully rendered to match that LEGO reality we're playing in. And that, at least, is incredibly well done. It's just everywhere else that this game falls flat. Begin level, run along a forest path, smash a few objects to get studs, slide down a zip line to big clearing full of enemies, shoot enemies till dead, collect gold brick, return to hub. Begin next level, run along forest path, smash a few objects to get studs, slide down zipline to big clearing full of enemies, shoot enemies till dead, collect gold brick, return to hub. Begin next level, run along forest path. Remember in the classic LEGO Star Wars games? Hell, even the pretty disappointing Skywalker saga from a couple years back. You'd have puzzles to do. Move LEGO bricks or crates around to build towers up to high ledges. Use character abilities to unlock doors and get past barriers. You know, just any kind of basic distraction from being just a straight run down corridor to the boss. Yeah, no, we don't do that here. Remember the mini-kit collectibles? The thrill of achieving true Jedi or equivalent? Finding all the red bricks? Yeah, none of that here. Hollow. Empty and hollow is all I can think to describe this game. The story is a loose retelling of the game, and I do mean pretty loose, but in a better game, I'd be okay with it. It moves pieces around so as to not be quite so lonely and miserable. You know, a LEGO game which starts you out as an orphan social outcast from birth wouldn't allow for any of the, you know, fun village barbershop interactions or whatever. It's playful, it's oversimplified to a point which kind of removes any of the good aspects of the original Zero Dawn story, but there is humour there, and I do appreciate how they brought back many of the original voice actors. Ashley Birch doing a goofier take on Aloy, JB Blanc as a self-aware mentor character and fourth wall breaking narrator Rost. Pretty much all the main cast are back and playable as characters, with the notable exception of the late Lance Reddick as Silence from the original games, who's now voiced by Tuvok, I guess, so assuming that's carrying on to the inevitable Horizon 3, cool. At least the game about the apocalyptic dangers of AI knew better than to try to digitally resurrect a dead actor. Small victories, I suppose. However, none of this takes away from the fact that the game itself is just a boring, tedious slog. Made all the worse for myself by making the terrible decision to put the game on the hardest difficulty, because, you know, surprisingly, this LEGO game has difficulty settings, and I'm a big boy and figured I could use at least a little bit of a challenge. Alas, all this did was turn every repetitive combat section into a total slog. Not any more complex or difficult, but just exponentially more tedious and grindy. All the while turning the first real boss fight of the game against the Corruptor unit into one of my worst experiences of the year. Hate doesn't begin to cover my feelings towards this screen-cluttered mess of one-shot deaths and zero checkpoints, requiring you to repeat the same monotonous run back every time a homing missile inevitably hits you because you didn't notice it in time to shoot it down amidst the mind-numbing amount of other shit on screen. I suppose this is what a second player in the touted on and offline co-op feature was intended for, spongy enemies and one-shot deaths not being quite such an issue if there's somebody else there to revive you, but Jesus Christ, is it just not worth it solo. In fact, the whole game, that could just be described up in that one sentence. It's not worth it solo. There's no fun to be had here. I can see it being enjoyable as a co-op experience, but that's it. Maybe. I mean, if I suppose I can't wrangle up a friend to play it with me, I can just find some rando online. There's gotta be plenty of people playing this game. Oh. I had resigned myself to just disengaging entirely, switching off and just chugging through enough of the game to justify the fact that I spent real, actual currency on it, but as soon as I realized that was what I was doing, that I wasn't actually enjoying myself, no. I have so many other things to play and so much else I could be doing. Fuck off. Dragon Age, the Veilguard. I always forget the in the Veilguard for whatever reason. I had to remind myself in the script to... Okay, I'm stalling. So, a full decade on from 2014's Dragon Age Inquisition, and I, for one, am more convinced than ever that nobody, fan or developer, really knows what the hell a Dragon Age game is. Say what you will about Mass Effect's transition into more cover-based action for more of a traditional RPG, that trilogy is a monolith of consistency compared to the lifelong identity crisis that poor Dragon Age has endured. From Dragon Age Origins' high fantasy epic, we flip to Dragon Age 2's rag to riches, episodic character-focused story, flopping again to Inquisition's single-player MMO, and now we flump to this. I could yap for well over an hour about what I did and didn't like from this latest, and probably final, installment in the Dragon Age series. I mean, it was certainly one of the more internet controversial games of last year, yet I'm also convinced that disproportionately far fewer people were actually playing the game compared to just, complaining about it online, particularly given how little of a ripple it seemed to make in the whole culture, past release week. In stark contrast to something like Baldur's Gate 3, whose fan art and video essays and all that guff crosses my timeline on the daily, and, I've never even played the damn game. Not yet, I've been too busy editing the Resistance video. Go watch the Resistance video, by the way. Point being, though, that I haven't exactly fed the algorithm that is an interest of mine, and yet compared to Dragon Age, a series I am actually interested in, I just see nothing. Anyway, all this to say that while I could speak for hours, this comes from the fact that I did actually play Veilguard to completion. Companion quests, a good majority of side quests, all that stuff. And while I didn't really like it, my thoughts are more complicated than just, "Grr, they ruined Dragon Age, insert that one face of Tash that she maybe makes at one point in the game on the thumbnail, grrr!" Genuinely guys, there needs to be a bit of introspection about the lack of original thought going around in YouTube thumbnails. If you want a solid recommendation for a more detailed and coherent breakdown, I'm actually going to recommend this 3-hour 15-minute video essay by YouTuber Echo Bazaar. I caught this a day or two after I finished playing the game myself, and I found it nearly perfectly captured my mess of then still being processed thoughts on what I just played. So, you can watch that later. But anyway, did I hate it? Not entirely. Is Veilguard as bad as its loudest critics say? Not quite. Is it worthy of claiming the mantle of BioWare's return to form? Fuck no. In a continuation of this series' habit of following sequels off of DLC that only a fraction of the previous game's player base actually would have played, we continue the cliffhanger that Inquisition's excellent Trespasser DLC left us, with base game party member Solus revealed to be the ancient elvish god Fen'Harel, the Dreadwolf, and who, regretfully, plans to tear down the veil which separates the magical demon and spirit realm of the Fade with the mortal plane, reverting creation to its original primordial state. Now, in preparation for Veilguard, I actually went back and did a 100% total completionist rerun of Inquisition. Now, I was never really that much in love with that game, to be honest, but I grew more fond of it the more I played, and especially playing Trespasser as a final send-off before Veilguard, I was fully invested in what was going to come next. The plot hook was compelling, the new lore around this old elven pantheon, the Evanuris, fascinating, being revealed as nothing more than powerful mages turned tyrants, in turn reframing the trickster god Fen'Harel into a tragic rebel figure, fighting against power-mad, self-appointed god kings. This is to say that there was absolutely something there. Something that I was genuinely interested in, some of which even does carry through to the final product. However, a decade of mismanagement, flip-flopping, yet again, from a multiplayer live service game through seemingly most of those past 10 years, then back to a single-player party-centric game, A lot of what many, self included, were obviously drawn to this franchise for was clearly lost in translation somewhere along the way. Taking on the role of Rook, a new character and inexplicable friend of series staple Varric, the game made its first mistake even before going through character creation. Rook, as the central protagonist, is easily the weakest of the series in my opinion, for the simple fact that they have no real reason to be in this position of leadership to begin with. Even as the game enters its final stretch, I never bought Rook as the right person for this job. More so than any previous lead, they feel like they've just turned up wearing the designated protagonist t-shirt, and everyone around them is just forced to play along with it. I'll just say it, the Inquisitor should have returned as the player character. Yes, this breaks with series tradition, but Solus was their mistake, their problem to fix, their friend, potentially even their lover, so who is this rando and why are they the ones sparring words with the Big Egg like they're lifelong enemies with this deep connection and personal history? Sure, it's nice that you can attempt to recreate the Inquisitor at the start of the game, for when they do eventually show up in this story, but I'm just left questioning why. If they can make time to visit Rook in some Tevinter pub, why not be the one fighting alongside Varric and Harding to deal with Solus in the first place? It doesn't seem like losing an arm in the previous DLC mattered that much in the end. Guess those grow back. Hell, in any case, and continuing the issue of this series' identity given the obnoxious leap in technology shown in this game, especially around elven ruins and the Veilguard faction, far more arcane than Tolkien if you ask me, I don't see any reason why we couldn't have early game companion Balatro craft us up some magical elven prosthetic or something. You know, there's ways around it. Speaking of companions, I actually liked them. Almost universally. The one I didn't care for may surprise you. In particular, Emmerich, this elderly gentleman necromancer with a crippling phobia of death and his own mortality, was a delight. Not to mention Manfred, his adorably marketable manservant. Davrin, our obligatory Grey Warden, who, going in, I didn't really expect anything from, was actually incredibly likeable, having been dropped into unexpected parental responsibility for one of the world's last surviving baby griffins. A warrior, and archetypal warden through and through, sure, but he avoids this stoic blandness that I was expecting, with instead a warmth and humour, especially as he starts to grow into this role. Balatro was my chosen romance, because, you know, it's a Bioware game, ya have to, and by what little I saw pre-release gave the obvious impression that this was going to be the cute, quirky, dorky addition to the crew. You know, the Tinkerer, the Artificer, the Meryl, the Tally, the Veronica, I have a type perhaps. While being expectedly adorable, she does more than skirt the boundary of cringy at times. It doesn't help that she's got this permanent "oh, and wonder about everything" way of speaking, and speaking is something she loves to do, but if you can learn to love that about her, she's an endearing presence. Albeit with one of the weaker personal quests, but with a 50-50 shot of being pivotal to the final act, as she was in my case, which, especially given the relationship I'd been building with her until this point, was a little bit nerve-wracking. Next up in this, I guess, unofficial ranking I'm doing, is the Antivan Crow Assassin Lucanus and Noir Detective Tevinter Mage Nev. Nev didn't do that much for me. It probably didn't help for the fact that I had her leaving the team for a while after one of the first major choices you make in the game. First impressions were pretty poor to begin with, in that she just kinda struts into the plot 5 minutes into the prologue. She's kinda the James Vega of this game in a way. Just standing there, uninvited, amongst otherwise old friends. As for Lucanus, I feel that I liked him more than I had any reason to. He has a bit too much going on, honestly. Legendary assassin, heir apparent to his guild, possessed by a demon which gives him extra crazy powers, yet never seems to have any of the whole, you know, abomination downsides previously established in the series. Oh, and he's a coffee snob. More than anyone else, he feels like someone's overwritten D&D OC, but maybe it's the fact that he's just so personable. Though that in itself opens up a whole other can about the lack of any real edge to these characters or this world, the lack of any meaningful conflict between party members, besides petty high school drama shit. Like, the animosity between Morrigan and Alistair in Dragon Age Origins is remembered fondly, yes, because of the humour, but there was real, irreconcilable ideological conflict there between a well-meaning and altruistic, if naive, ex-Templar trained to hunt rogue mages, and a cynical social Darwinist who also happens to be an apostate witch. Thinking that your hyperfixation on dragons is cooler than Emmerich's hyperfixation on corpses is not a meaningful point of character conflict. It's banter, at best. Like, I'm honestly surprised more people didn't make an issue of the possessed demon man sipping his coffee in the corner, but no, the only time that ever gets brought up is because Davrin thinks assassins are dishonourable and bad. A problem that gets instantly resolved after, like, one conversation. On the topic of character conflict, though, this brings us neatly onto the infamously controversial Canary companion, Tash. Infamous and controversial because, you guessed it, woke. Pronouns! Tash is alright. Their personal arc of self-discovery mostly succeeded in weaving twin threads of resolving their cultural identity, being born as Canary, read scary, suppressive, Orientalist stand-in, while being raised as Riveni, read progressive, liberal, Western stand-in, we are very subtle, as well as their chosen gender identity, feeling likewise trapped between two worlds as they eventually come to terms with themselves as non-binary. There's also the whole thing about her being a fire-breathing Canary, which is like a rare genetic condition, and she's being hunted down by this Canary warlord who wants to turn her into a weapon, and it's symbolic of like how he's also catching dragons and twisting them against their nature, and how it's all metaphorical of being forced into a box that you don't personally feel comfortable with within yourself, and, you know, symbolism. But of course, she's non-binary, so she's the one who gets all the flack and criticism and the overly scrutinized writing, and we just kind of ignore the fact that it's actually a fairly well-crafted, thematically appropriate story. Meanwhile, absolutely nobody has anything to say about Lucanus' story, even though it's just cut and paste. My brother tried to kill me so he could take over the guild. Oh, spoilers for the least surprising plot twist in history, I suppose. The disputes this creates with their traditionalist Canary mother, thank God, character conflict, on both the culture and gender fronts made for some strong character moments, almost certainly overshadowed for most players, and non-players who just want to get angry about something that week, by the fact that the specific words, I am
non-binary,
come out of the character's mouth. Is it jarring to hear in a medieval setting? Yes. Is it subtle? No. Was it a mistake to have been written this way then? Nah, subtext is for cowards. Honestly, I'm just glad the writers had the balls to just say what they meant, rather than dance around the issue with obvious allegory and euphemism, or replace the term non-binary with some silly, fantasified name. Now, I will not bullshit you and pretend that some of the dialogue around this, as with, to be fair, most of the game dialogue in general, wasn't forced and clunky at times. I mean, I would physically wince, my entire arsehole retracting back up into my body anytime there was a group meeting and someone would, like, totally by accident just misgender Tash, and then, oh, everything has to stop. We gotta do the forced apology, gotta do the self-flagellation. I'm so sorry, Tash, I didn't mean to, that was so disrespectful and problematic of me. And it's like, Jesus Christ, Harding, we get it, you're woke, we all are here. Tone it down. Fuck, now you've got me trying to imagine Origins-era Morrigan having the same conversation. Like, she's either coming out as a full-on gender abolitionist, or with slurs hitherto unheard of. Who does that leave us with? Oh yeah, the one companion that actually didn't work for me. Sorry, Lace Harding. I liked you in Inquisition as a side character with a heap of charm, but you were bland as oatmeal in this with some of the worst dialogue.
Ugh. Awkward.
Actually, that's not entirely fair. The dialogue, as I mentioned, could be pretty gash all around.
Well, that was awkward.
While oof was a possible root response to hearing some horrible tragedy or another, like at least 2 or 3 times.
You'll have to kill me.
Well, that was awkward.
Again, like a lot of things, the dialogue shined most with the gravitas of legacy characters. Morrigan, whose transformation across the series into this, her final form, as the almost custodian of a lost ancient magical culture, and guardian of balance between spirits, nature and man, I actually have grown to quite like. Given that, going back to the previous games, all of these aspects, albeit with different temperaments, has been there since the beginning. Then we got Solus, who honestly just elevates every scene he's in. This is a character I never frankly gave much of a shit about in Inquisition, a fact which only makes his true nature more ironic, but has since become one of, if not the most compelling characters in the setting for me. Unfortunately, he is out of the spotlight for most of the game, as new big bads supplant him after the prologue. The Elven Gods, Elgarnan and Gillenane, and what do you know? I didn't even need to check Google for what those names were, because I don't think I'll ever be able to forget after hearing them brought up in every conversation for the entire 70-hour game. Yeah, we should probably talk about the actual plot now. Dealing mostly with tracking down and defeating these formerly imprisoned, blighted gods, these villains are better than previous BBEG Corypheus, who in retrospect seems even more pathetic than he already did. There are sufficiently clear and huge stakes in this, more akin to Origin's apocalyptic battle against the Blight, which I find much harder to say about Inquisition's. We could deal with the demon portal in the sky pretty much anytime, let's go hunting for shards. The problem is, I find, as with Rook's own square peg round holing in as the main protagonist, how messily the narrative is actually told. There's a lot of head-scratching questions about this state of the world. The Inquisition, the Kunari Antam, the Chantry, the Tevinter Imperium, none of which are given nearly enough time or explanation. A particularly bad example, which hit me like a ton of bricks by the time I got out the end of it, was how shallow Veilguard made the religious conflicts of the Dragon Age world. Now, this might sound a bit niche, but it's always been a big part of the game, right back to Origins. Here, though, in spite of the apparent return of heretical elven deities, neither the Andrastrian Chantry nor the elves themselves seem all that fazed, beyond an immediate acceptance and apparent understanding that they are the evil video game villains. But broadly speaking, my biggest problem with the story, by far, is just how it totally demystified the setting. Like, spoiler warning, but the old gods, those Tevinter god dragons turned archdemons who herald the blights upon the world? Yeah, nah, elf gods did it. The Blight itself? Elf gods did it. The Black City, this biblical seat of divine power corrupted by the hubris of man? Elf gods. Just a regular elf god prison. Andraste herself? Almost certainly an elf god. My brother in Christ? Probably an elf god. Is there any foundational religion in this fantasy universe which wasn't just a misremembered history of the Evanuris? Meanwhile, the Canary chilling over on Parvolin. Hey kids, ever read the teachings of Ashkari Coslin? Just kidding. Even the Qun got effectively neutered by this game, having the entire Canary military defect from the faith to become generic super mutant enemies, inexplicably allied with Garlic Nan and what's-his-name. Despite all that, if this is to be the final entry in this series, which it is looking increasingly likely it will be, I have to admit it does wrap up a lot of things in a surprisingly conclusive way. Too conclusive, maybe. The final act kicked what was, for the most of the preceding hours, a pretty dull experience, into absolute overdrive, throwing shades of BioWare's greatest hits into the mix. We have an element of risk and consequence from choosing squad mates of certain loyalties for certain tasks, as with Mass Effect 2's suicide mission. We have the collective effort of factions and armies you may or may not have helped prepare for the moment, as in Dragon Age Origins' Battle of Denerim or Mass Effect 3's Priority Earth. And I can't lie when I just say that the last hour or two was pretty good. We'll say there was this unintentionally hilarious moment during the final prepare your team for the last charge portion of the quest, where, you know, you're having like your final conversation with all of these companions, you know, it's probably going to be the last time you talk to them before the credits, and you enter into a makeshift morgue, full of all the fallen heroes and party members and characters that we've grown to love that have got us this far in the fight. And the camera lingers way too long on each one of these totally blank corpses of nobody, of absolutely nobody, while the sad music is playing. Because nobody died! Not one person worth the fuck actually died in my entire playthrough, with the one exception, the one fucking named dude being This shadow dragon guy I never actually spoke to, whose entire personality was his drippy hat, which is just sitting awkwardly on his body, and it's like, it just got me. It was fucking surreal, man. All things considered, this review hasn't been that negative, I feel, which might beg the question, why so low down on my list then? Well, you'll notice I have completely forsaken any discussion of video gameplay in this here video game review. Well, for everything that I might say positive or negative about story, characters, graphics, or music, the fundamental roadblock to me enjoying this game was that I despised the combat system. Hot take? Lukewarm take? I don't know. I don't know what the common consensus is here, but this change from RPG combat to active hack and slash was just really not for me. Now, you know me, or maybe you don't, but Soulsborne's methodical, timing, parry, dodging combat, Bloodborne, Dark Souls, like it a lot. Platinum games, stylish slashers, Nier Automata, Metal Gear Rising, Revengeance, love that shit. Obviously turn-based, or pseudo-turn-based, almost tactical RTS combat like in Dragon Age Origins or Inquisition, I like that too. But whatever combat system you design, pick a fucking lane! As I'm stuck perpetually dodging through relentless, screen-cluttering magic spam, red attack incoming circles forever appearing wherever the fuck I'm currently standing, denying me even a fraction of a second to stop moving and aim my goddamn bow and arrow, I'm forced to question why the hell my ranged archer is the sole focus of all enemy attention, and not, I don't know, either of the fucking tanks I've got on the team. But, of course, your party members aren't real. They're not there in the same sense that Morrigan, or Dorian, or Cassandra, or... who the fuck is Sebastian? No, the main purpose of companions in this game, as far as I can tell, is to provide a different selection of spells that we can throw out and synergize with each other. Sure, there might be a character model on screen running around, but they're not really there. Not in the same sense that the player is. So when it comes to the fight itself, you are really on your own. The others may as well just be power-ups. To this end, the dragon fights I found particularly unfun for a lot of these reasons, while boss fights like Vietnam and David Blaine are just tedious. Look, I'm not going to pretend that Origins had some amazing combat system, God knows it didn't, but I thought Dragon Age 2 started to perfect it, and I am one of those weirdos who quite liked Inquisition, at least when I played it as a mage, with all of those tasty spell detonations when you have a caster-heavy team. Sure, Veilguard is flashier, but hands-on, it was just relentlessly unenjoyable to engage with. I don't know how else to put it. I could talk more. I glossed over the art style, character creation and backgrounds, the skill tree, armor designs, and the different, but I think effective way it handles loot. But I feel this has been long enough, and I've satisfied my main points of contention. Is it the worst Dragon Age game? Yes, no hesitation, but especially with that strong finish, I think it had more going for it than at first glance. It's like a 5 out of 10. 6 maybe, if I did numeric ratings, which I guess I just did, and I think that's fair.
Hopefully that means fewer tentacles.
I'm hoping for none. None tentacles would be good.
Well, that was awkward.
Star Wars Outlaws. So I had written this one off pretty much entirely last year, but I did end up picking it up on sale just a few months ago for the PS5, and, for a game which garnered as much online hate and controversy last year as this one did, I have to say that Star Wars Outlaws was surprisingly completely inoffensive. Totally lacking in offense. Okay, sure, we could talk about the pricing of various special editions, expansion packs, cosmetic microtransactions, but, in current year, who actually gives a shit about that anymore? I mean, it's not like I don't care. These things are still off-putting to me. I do find it annoying that I boot up the game and immediately have DLC being advertised to me on the title screen, or like the fact that there's a button prompt in your in-game character menu. you know, where your inventory and shit is, taking you directly to an online store. That shit sucks. I've always hated it. Ubisoft games, I mean, the last one I played was Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and that really struck me as weird there, and it's not gone away since. But, end of the day, this was a war that we lost a long time ago, so moving on. Now, besides that, this game takes the award for being the most banal, by the numbers, that sure was a video game experience of 2024. Playing as Kves, an early days Han Solo type character trying to make their way in a galaxy where every patch of dirt is either paying fealty to an impressive all-encompassing empire or one of several crime syndicates and cartels, after being roped into a heist gone bad upon the vault of one particular crime boss, Slevo, Silvio, whoever, ends up on the run with a stolen antique ship and a price on her head. After a decent setup, the game can take a good while to really get going, as we crash land on the first of a handful of these open worlds, with several hours of side quests and odd jobs and, is this a side quest or a mandatory part of continuing the story? Quests for the various gangs of this universe. It feels like a good long while you're tied down on this first world, waiting for the plot to really kick in, but there's no shortage of the usual open world faff to do, from treasure hunts to gambling, including a whole sabacc side game thing, which, I mean, it's there if you're really into it. I found it fun enough and surprisingly simple enough to grasp after a couple of rounds. But no, Outlaws' core gameplay is still very much the typical Ubisoft open world, but I can't say it does any of it particularly or especially poorly. Nor especially well, of course. Like, nothing about this game stands out. That's kind of the bottom line here. It really is just passable, the video game. I tried to stick with stealth as much as possible, given it's the usual, you know, you can do it loud, you can do it quiet type game. Partly because I found it marginally more engaging to do it sneakily than the straightforward combat, but also because you want to avoid both the syndicate reputation loss, which can occur if you're doing a job for the Hutts against the Crimson Dawn, for example, or the GTA-style Imperial Wanted rating that comes with being caught doing certain crimes. Also, there is the ludonarrative hit that comes with being this scrappy, barely trained little lady suddenly blasting her way through a small army of syndicate enforcers or Imperial troops, with her pet cat salamander by her side. You know, kinda wanted to roleplay at least a little bit here. So saying that, the stealth is serviceable. Again, it's the most mediocre game ever. Nothing's done particularly bad, nothing's done particularly good, but it is entirely cut and paste from other games. You know, whistle to attract guards, stealth takedowns, you're invisible if you're standing in the grass or a steam pipe. You know, we've done all of this shit before. The worst thing I can honestly say about it, besides being derivative, is how unpredictably it would sometimes swing from being the most hilariously easy "how the hell are you not hearing me, punch out your buddy 5 feet away" to immediately spotted by someone a quarter mile away the second I start a takedown animation of one of their comrades, like just barely in their line of sight. You know, it's like 98% of the time, really, really easy, and then suddenly your false sense of security is shattered as you're being spotted by people with fucking radars in their head. Thankfully, there was a post-launch patch which removed forced stealth fail states from all missions. You know, in the past, before I ever got to the game, thankfully, there would have been missions where the second you get spotted, you get that, you were spotted, game over, you know, like the Mary Jane missions from Spider-Man that nobody liked. But, so thankfully, since I never had to experience that, if you get spotted, whether Empire or Syndicate, you can just start blasting, and you just gotta take the aforementioned GTA-style wanted rating, or your syndicate reputation will go down if you're acting against one group in favour of another. And when blasting does start, I actually, despite this being a bit of a sticking point for some reviewers, liked what it did with weapons. So no, we don't get to craft our own loadout. This is not the game where you're like selecting different weapon types and builds or anything like that. We have our one multifunction personal blaster. Now this itself does have, like I say, a few functions. It's got your charged blast, your stun function, ion bolts, whatever. But what we can do is find or loot weapons in the game, from enemies, from weapon racks, wherever. Snipers, grenade launchers, even Gatling guns once we have the special training required. And these weapons, they are limited in use, they can't be reloaded or recharged. But what I like about this is, again, we are just this scrappy outlaw girl. We are not a super soldier, so this leans into the scrappy nature of combat. You know, you're improvising and using whatever you can scrounge up in the moment. Take up a blaster, fire a couple shots off, throw that aside, pick up a grenade launcher, shoot an ATST. You know, you're like I say, improvisational. But with that said, you can leave a mission with these weapons still with you, and as far as I could tell, I was going around with the same sniper rifle strapped to my waist for multiple missions at a time, so long as they still have the charge. Now, being an open world, we have the standard traversal guff, with moments of climbing and swinging around, reminiscent of Fallen Order or any Ghost of a Rising Creed game, but even so, they somehow managed to fumble even the basics here, just a little bit, with me having issues getting some prompts, you know, grab ledge, vault barrier, to actually trigger smoothly. This really made the parkouring kind of comparatively clunky compared to a lot of its inspirations, which you'd think by now any open world game, especially from a publisher as known for their open world games as this one, would have perfected this basic core mechanic by now, but okay. Also, like any other open world game, we have our mount, in this case, the speeder, complete with the as standard press up to call your horse button, which every one of these games has, but I will say I actually really quite liked how this felt to handle. Okay, maybe I'm spoiled for the lack of Star Wars speeders elsewhere, like Battlefront 2. EA is the last game I can remember that has you driving around with a speeder, and in that game, they are arse. But here this has a real sense of heft, especially with the PS5's adaptive triggers. Spaceflight, meanwhile, didn't do anything for me, unfortunately. I tried my best to avoid it, in fact, for most of the game entirely. Anytime one of these missions came up that was like, go, retrieve cargo from a crashed freighter and avoid the pirates, I'm just gonna be like, nah, I'll do the Imperial base infiltration mission instead. They're much more fun for me. Now, Kay's ship is nice. The interior is nice to explore around when docked. You've got your kitchen area. You can have a little bowl of food for your salamander cat. You have a wardrobe and different outfits that you do collect, of which there are a decent selection, and some of them actually look quite nice. With the option, what do they call it again? Transmogging, where you can just fashion it up with whatever you feel looks good while having the stats of something else, and there are like set bonuses. However, no, you can't leave the controls of your ship and walk around while in orbit or in hyperspace, only when it's docked and landed, which, little nitpick, but I always like to have that as an option, and it's a shame. Especially in an open world Star Wars game, that's like just one of those little touches that make you feel much more immersed in the world. Now, there are only 5 planets in this game, with 3 of them being true open worlds. And I like the variety. Kijimi, despite the Rise of Skywalker connections, was particularly nice, even if just one of the smaller, more enclosed city locations. And of course, we have Tatooine, beautifully recreated, though running around this planet in particular, which for me was my 3rd, so I'm over the midpoint in the game by this point, if that explains any of my feelings here. But running around Tatooine definitely highlighted just how unnecessary the open world here and in a lot of games really was. Like, for all the work and all the development time that went into recreating this beautiful Mos Eisley spaceport, like, oh my god, it's this from the movie, oh, the Dewback stormtroopers, just like the movie, but no gameplay is occurring. There's no gameplay at any point. You spend 6 minutes driving across barren wasteland, then another 4 minutes jogging through the streets of Mos Eisley to get to the quest giver in the cantina. And what happens during any of this time? Nothing. Not if you're lucky, you might get attacked by raiders out in the Dune Sea when you're driving around, but nothing happens in the city. It's complete bloat. It's unnecessary open world because there's barely any quest givers. You can't interact with any NPCs. There's nothing really to find. It really just made the whole game feel like, right, I am just wasting my time trying to get from objective marker to objective marker here. And other than, ooh, that's nice, there's it's giving me nothing. So, by the time I got to the jungle planet, which was my 5th and final world I explored, and the 3rd of the truly open world environments, I was completely disengaged with the open world exploration entirely. Having spent a decent amount exploring that first world, at this point I was just going from one objective to the other in the shortest route possible. Like just, oh, somebody wants to give me a side quest, ignore, drive straight fucking past that cunt. Now, the story, meanwhile, once it actually builds some momentum, is fine. Truly the solo film of Star Wars games, with the same tone, tropes, predictable portrayals, hell, even some of the same characters. The overall format of doing work for syndicates with options to double-cross and backstab one group over another with this reputation system sounds good, but it falls definitely flat. For one, it is unreasonably easy for this absolute nobody street rat living in the attic of a bookie a few hours ago to become best buds with almost every crime lord in the galaxy. Like, honestly, Daenerys Targaryen, why are you even giving me the light of day? And while the game does give you these warnings about, oh, you could betray the Pikes for more reputation with the Hutts, but the Pikes will remember this. But honestly, betrayals are forgiven after 1 or 2 repeatable go steal X from Y jobs. So it's very easy just to get all of your reputations to maximum with all of these groups. Like, a little bit of grind, doing side quests here and there, but honestly, barely an inconvenience. But honestly, more than that, and kind of tying into both those other problems, is the fact that these people trafficking, drug running, murderous cartels are just too nice and kind of reasonable. The whole seedy underworld of the galaxy that this game is trying to present to us is really edgeless. Not a single edge to be found. Please, let me have just a little edge. Just a little. As a treat. On that note, to finally address the real controversy around Outlaws, can I goon to the main character? Kves is likeable, if uninteresting as a protagonist, likewise lacking any edge, generically happy-go-lucky, even as melting the faces of pirates and soldiers. While the game gives her a crumb of trauma concerning abandonment, in turn playing into her relationships both with her animal companion, Nyx, who I really did like by the way, and provided one of the only compelling missions of the game in my opinion, as well as in her eventual friendship with the aura-farming BX commando droid ND5, Kay herself never really goes through much of an arc beginning to end. Again, as a product of this tame, PG underworld setting, there's never a point where this seemingly nice, affable, do the right thing, fight injustice kid questions their association with the aforementioned people-trafficking, drug-running murderers of the galaxy. The side characters are pretty mixed. Silvio Dante, or whoever, is a little underbaked as a villain. I actually had a moment, coming up to writing this script, I was casting my memory back to my time with this game, which at that time had only been a few days ago since I completed it, and I could not, for the life of me, remember what happened to this character. Like, he's the main villain, and I was just like, did he die? What happened to him? just for a moment. We've got off-brand Kyle Katarn, who the Codex has the fucking gall to describe as charming while having the charisma of a substitute gym teacher.
I don't joke about business.
Good. Because you're not very funny.
I do believe in you, Kay. Always have.
Damn, Ferric. Okay, enough with the speeches.
There's a parental figure who we never really get attached to. Quick aside, by the way, just to also mention how stiff and unpleasant the facial animations in this game are. Like, say what you will about Veilguard, but at least that game mostly looked current gen, while this is definitely still stuck in like 2017 Battlefront 2 campaign. I do like some of the crewmates we can recruit, the wee bomb-obsessed bat freak being my favourite, who speaks entirely in a version of Huttese, which, unless I'm mistaken, was cooked up specifically for this game, and sounds really good by the way. Knights of the Old Republic, this is not.
What? You don't even know what's in the vault.
And of course, we have to get to ND5. Now, I love a good BX droid as much as the next guy. More, probably, than the next guy. I got 2 squads of them sitting in the wings for Star Wars Legion. They have aura. But for being right on the box alongside Kay, front and center in the marketing, with an objectively awesome design, he has disappointingly little presence until the last third of the story. Across the board, by the way, these crewmates you're picking up will not actually join you in the world for the most part, and it's not even until a mission close to the end where ND5 proves he has a walk cycle. So just know going in, this isn't like a Mass Effect situation with companions you can take with you and explore and quest and romance, if you're into it. But that all said about ND5, I did like him eventually, but the friendship just isn't really there for most of the game, making this relationship be used as the core of the climax a little difficult to believe. Like, okay, I get Kay has her issues with abandonment and doesn't like leaving people behind who she considers friends, except for that one time she apparently left her Rhodian friend behind, but never mind that. But let's just say that the lengths she goes to in the final act and the final few moments of the game for a robot who'd only just stopped threatening her with death every other comment is a bit hard to swallow. I'm talking like Luke and Han Solo storming the Death Star prison block to rescue 3PO levels of disbelief. Like, sure, Luke would be pretty bummed if his brand new protocol droid had to get left behind, but no offense, Anthony Daniels, priorities, mate. Also, my final, probably most flatly negative point about this game was that the autosave system is some inexcusable dog shit. Just the amount of times I would fail on a mission in some way, like killed by a pirate swarm while doing one of those aforementioned cargo run space missions, or arrested during an infiltration mission before I got a chance to actually shoot back, and the only available save being either an autosave right after loading back in after the failed state, or 40 fucking minutes earlier. I mean, I know sometimes missions are labelled as high risk, you only get one shot at this, unless of course you remember to manually save first, but in practice, this just leads to frustration at having completely wasted your time. Accept a contract, travel across half the map to get to the actual target location, only to lose 2 quests worth of reputation with that faction for failing, or of credits on Imperial legal fees. Like, okay, sure, consequence for failure, I get it, but nobody likes to have their time wasted. Outlaws is far then from the ultimate Star Wars game, ranking well short of the Jedi Fallen Order games and just below Battlefront 2. But still easily above EA's first Battlefront game just by the virtue of it having the single player story. If it hadn't been so grossly overdeveloped, what was it, $200 to $300 million in budget, I'd be more positively inclined towards it just for being like an alright Star Wars game set in this universe, not about Jedi or starfighters or with a multiplayer focus. Kinda like what we had during the LucasArts heyday. I mean, very few of the PS2 era Star Wars games were great, but we had variety. So honestly, I actually wouldn't have minded getting more games similar to this. Not a sequel, as it turns out, because as I'm recording this, we just found out a week or so ago that the game's sequel was cancelled, but similar. In that we might explore different perspectives, different stories, different characters, different eras, different locations and planets, but with preferably hugely deflated budgets, scope, and fluff. There was no reason this had to be open world whatsoever, other than for it to have the veneer of a Grand Theft Auto Star Wars as you zoom about. But when I couldn't feel my limited time on this planet slipping through my hands like grains of sand in the Dune Sea while driving from one barren objective location to another, I by no means had a bad time playing it. Star Wars Outlaws. Bland, but fine. McClunky.
If you don't stay alone, you could end up getting hurt. You
Okay,
gotta
go ahead.
stop and think, then you'll be king of the road.
Balatro. And content warning. No, that's the name of a game I'm going to be talking about. It's not Extreme Gore and Balatro, of all things. I'm just combining these two together because I have very little to say about either, but I did play them both, and both represent a significant aspect of 2024's year in gaming. Balatro, for obvious reasons, being the indie critical darling, winning multiple game awards, and even a Game of the Year nomination, while Content Warning did none of that, but is a perfect representation of what I call the four morons in hazmat suits doing something spooky for Twitch engagement genre, which really seemed to take off over the past year and a half, 2 years or so, largely in the wake of the success of 2023's Lethal Company. But Balatro first. All I can say is, I get it, but it ain't really for me. It was one of those games late last year which just started appearing one day in the gaming lexicon around me, with no context for what or who a Balatro is, or what he wanted with me. Podcasters I'd listened to were just suddenly talking all the time about how hooked they were on it, and it starts showing up in these nominations, and yet I never once actually caught a glimpse of gameplay. I didn't even know what were we talking about. Well, here it is. It's a poker roguelike. I now understand why I never saw much gameplay, because I don't imagine it's much of a streamable game, if I'm being honest. No shade to it. So, you build hands and try to get as high a score as you can off of the typical poker hands. You know, flushes, houses, straights, queers. I've never actually played poker, so this is all kind of nonsense to me. Yet, to Balatro's credit, it onboards the player pretty damn well, to the point where even a total novice like myself was getting the swing of it. But as soon as it starts leaving the standard poker trail by offering booster cards and tarot cards and all sorts of multipliers and modifiers, I tapped out. Now obviously this is what makes the game fun and obviously elevates it, but this is clearly where the roguelike aspects come in, the slight element of randomization in a run as you're trying to get as high a score as you possibly can or whatever. The bottom line is I've just personally never been that into card games or deck builders to begin with, never really mind roguelikes, so having gotten the gist, I was happy to move on. And on the subject of wasting time, this brings us to our other featurette. Lethal Company, Repo, Sketchy Contract, Murky Divers, Panic Delivery, Scary Cargo, the deluge of this highly specific subgenre of the broader, and usually more varied and creative, Four Morons co-op game, which could cover everything from hunting ghosts in Phasmophobia to fighting bugs in Helldivers 2, Content Warning is firmly in the Twitch bait, let's go to a spooky place and do a thing, and also retro art style and or physics wonkery and also either space or diving suit for some reason corner of the genre. With that said though, I can almost forgive Content Warning for its self-aware premise, in that instead of doing spooky deliveries or whatever for the sake of a lazy gameplay loop, we're out here doing the highly dangerous spooky nonsense specifically to farm that sweet, sweet algorithmic engagement. That's right, we're content creators. Fuck. So, playing fully into character as insufferable Gen Z YouTubers Chad and Craig, aka the Rizzity Skib Toilets, or whatever the fuck we called ourselves, we delve, armed only with our camcorder and a lust for followers, into abandoned shipwrecks or infested mines to annoy and poke the local wildlife while putting on the most thumbnailable face reactions. And you won't believe what happened next. Oh, and this was the channel mascot! Buy our smirch! Basically, you have 3 in-game days to capture the most harrowing, interesting, thrilling, monster-filled footage you can, uploading whatever you retrieve, sometimes in classic found footage fashion from the site of a friend's previous demise, as a short 1 minute 20 second or so home video onto the interweb, which is recorded and saved separately onto your PC in fantastically crunchy 420p resolution, all while watching that view count and viewer engagement climb.
Hey, pal! Hey, pal! No, it's got me!
So, yeah, be sure to like and subscribe. You gotta pay for, Craig's, funeral. Failure to reach a certain threshold leaves you lost and forgotten by the all-powerful algorithm, at which point you wake up from that horrible nightmare of failed ambitions to start your dream all over again. It is fun, don't get me wrong, and I feel it might have just that right combination of humour and irony, as well as legitimate organic moments of player-led comedy that make me like this game more than many of the other Lethal Company clones out there. But I think there's two things that killed it for me. Actually, scratch that. Three things based on my most recent experience, which I'll just get out of the way now. Why won't the videos render half the time? Like, we go through all of this shit, we throw the camcorder into the device, and then it just... Oh.
What the fuck? Okay, this game's just broken.
Yeah, so that's kind of killed the game completely now. But before that point, there were two other more systemic things. First, most straightforwardly, a lack of content. What is it exactly, 2, maybe 3 maps? Very quickly, the same roster of spooky monsters. So, you know, it's going to very quickly lose that sense of freshness and mystery. But the bigger killer for me is when you end up recording an absolute comedic horror show of content gold with your friends. Again, all in character as just the worst people imaginable. And then, you know, you get killed by something. Who knows what. Alright, you lose the footage. You try to go back and get it, and you die again. And eventually, that whole fucking experience is just gone. It's lost forever. This can happen 2, 3 times in a row, and it's demoralizing. You know, especially after you just had, like, the craziest thing found on camera, and then you go back in, and not 10 seconds in, a giant fella rushes out and total party wipes you in the blink of an eye. You know, at that point, it's less fun and more confusing and annoying. In any case, as far as genre cannibalism goes, I think the 4 dudes in diving/hazmat suits doing scary stuff genre has been fairly thoroughly explored, to the point where a post-ironic installment like this can come out, both being a Twitch bait derivative entry in itself, while directly commenting on the eternal chase for internet relevancy. On an unrelated note, remember to like the video and subscribe if you haven't. Hit that bell icon for... IGN gave this game a 7 out of 10, but I did not speak up, for I was not IGN. I, after seeing all that this game had going for it, think 7 out of 10 is pretty reasonable, actually. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Sparking Zero can be a lot of fun, but I'm not convinced that this is the Dragon Ball game that I think the hype cycle preceding it definitely built it up to be. For everything it pulls off better than a past installment, there is something that it does weaker. Now, if you know me or this channel, you should know my history with Dragon Ball and its games. I was a latecomer and did not grow up with the classics, the Budokai Tenkaichi series in particular, which this is technically the latest installment of after a long hiatus. This is why, just for this part of the video, I brought on someone who did have a bit more nostalgia and experience with those games, for some context, and also just to get a good, second, equally mixed opinion. You can probably guess who. I suppose just in general, how do you feel about Sparking Zero, Sam? As the guy who has played Tenkaichi, Budokai, and a lot more Dragon Ball games than me in general, like, how are you with it? As if I don't already know your answer, but you know.
I mean, this is our first time we've ever spoke about it, isn't it? I mean, I can't shake the feeling that there is something still very missing from this game, despite its disgustingly bloated roster.
Looking back at the modern games that I have played, though, I have to ask myself, does Sparkling Water do enough better, or enough different, than Xenoverse 2, than Fighters, than Kakarot, to be seen as a worthwhile step up? Well, after playing through much of the story mode and finding myself uninterestedly skipping through the tedious slideshow in which this series' long and storied history was, for some reason, being told, I think I had an answer. So I was saying I was playing through some of the story recently, and the biggest, the most absolute ass Scorsese putting hands up Yeah, the most absolute ass moment cinematically is that. So my favorite moment in all of Dragon Ball, I have made no qualms about this, is Gohan versus Cell. You know, the big finale, the father-son Kamehameha. And you know what they do with it? They PowerPoint presentation.
They did not PowerPoint presentation.
They PowerPoint presentationed the climactic, most like emotionally resonant moment of like the whole story arc of Dragon Ball Z, from that initial episode where we find out Goku has this son who doesn't want to fight, who isn't anything like his dad, who eventually learns to fight and fight for his own reasons, and eventually saves the fucking world against Cell, and they make it a PowerPoint presentation. And they don't even show like the moment itself. And it's like, yep, this is like the perfect example of what is wrong with the story mode of this game. Like, I don't know what the previous games were like, but I get the impression that fighting through the Namek saga, or speaking of which, here's Zarbon. Where were you in the story mode? This is exactly my point. Like, you go in the story mode, and it's like, alright, I beat Vegeta. I didn't actually get to beat him. It was a slideshow of Yajirobe cutting his tail off, just for added salt in the wound. Next thing I know, maybe I'm fighting the Ginyus, or maybe I'm going straight to fighting fucking Final Form Frieza. It's like, where's the sense of adventure that I think, from what I've seen in the previous games, I think there was a sense of, like, moving along the map is like moving through the story, right?
Yeah. I will say, and I know that this could probably be a bit controversial, because again, I know that people love 3. I actually think Tenkaichi 2 is by far, like, game-wise, outside of Kakarot, like, the best retelling of Z. Like, you know, you pretty much do all the major fights in it. Like, I get it's a whole thing if you don't want to feel like you're treading the same ground, but you should also feel like you can retell a story that everyone who knows it likes anyway, and people that don't know it would probably like to know it.
But yeah, breaking things up between the different story arcs, where it's like 1 minute you're fighting second form Cell, and the next minute you're fighting Beerus, and it's like, we've just skipped 10 fucking years, near enough, of content for this character. And if you want to get the in-between stories, you now got to go play Vegetas, or Gohans, or Piccolos, or whatever.
Yeah.
So great. With story modes for Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, Piccolo, Frieza, and Goku Black, I've run partly through each of them, if only as a quick source of player XP, which grinds after level 15 or so, and acts as a level gate to unlocking certain characters, but honestly, I have sparking zero desire to play through any more of these than I have to. And, finally, having hit level 20, I don't have to at all! Yay! The ultimate Dragon Ball game. I've just become level 20. Finally!
Why?
Glad I got that on camera. I've been grinding for that since 2024. It's October 25! In terms of difficulty, because that is the other thing that is quite off-putting about the main story. I remember back when this game came out, the meme online, the big community discussion online was Great Ape Vegeta being a Dark Souls boss or something. Which,
he wasn't.
Having replayed it earlier today before this chat, not that bad.
He honestly wasn't that bad. There are so many.
This is not me saying, actually, the game's easy, get good. This is me saying, yes, it was challenging, but actually, compared to everything that comes after, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. The AI is relentless in this game, and it is very off-putting for getting through the story mode, in my opinion.
Yeah, like, so, for me, the one that always sticks out personally is the Piccolo versus third form Frieza one, where, like, you're fighting him as second form, and then when he turns into third form, I think you have to beat him in something disgusting like 15 seconds, or else it does the dialogue where you know you fucked it up and it's just on the main timeline.
Now, the only other reason to put yourself through the painfully aggressive AI in these pre-baked episodic storylines would be for the often touted what-if alternate timeline story events that can trigger when certain mission criteria are met. But from what I've seen, these just aren't at all worth it.
I actually do appreciate what they were trying to do. Like, they knew that people really liked the what-ifs in Tenkaichi 3 and 2. So they were like, how about we just make it so the whole story can have many different like what if modes. I think that's in concept, I think it's a brilliant idea, but the way they do it in the sort of PowerPoint presentation way a lot of the time,
it's not good, is it?
It comes across a bit like they wanted to do it and then decided they didn't, and they're like, okay, can we just get to the part where we make Chaozu, Dodon Ray, Tien repeatedly? If you're going to have what-if scenarios, please let us play as the what-if scenario characters. Don't be like, you can't play as, I guess spoilers for it, Gohan Black, like, or, like Saiyan Saga Vegeta as a Super Saiyan.
So I will say I have not gotten to the point where Gohan Black becomes a thing, and at this rate I never will. But I have to say, that sounds like a more interesting example of what the game has otherwise done everywhere else, which is, here's our crazy what-if scenario that, like, the old Tenkaichi games were kind of known and remembered fondly for, if I'm kind of not talking out my ass.
Yeah, they are absolutely known for shit like Spike the Devil Man versus Frieza.
Yeah, what if Zarbon betrayed Frieza to get the Dragon Balls so that he could become the most beautiful man in all the universe, or whatever. But yeah, the what if scenarios here are like, what if Gohan beats Cell 5 minutes faster? The world is saved. Or, you know, what if Mecha Frieza killed Trunks? He then kills Goku and destroys the world. I mean, okay, it's like, it's shown in the PowerPoint presentation again. It's like not particularly that groundbreaking. These, like, the idea of like split timelines where your decisions will impact the future, except you only get to see, you know, one mission and one PowerPoint, and then you're back on the main track again. Combat, meanwhile, is all over the place. In some ways, it has captured the frenetic speed of the anime in a way that almost no other game has, coupled with levels of destruction and allowing enemies to be thrown through buildings and mountains and all that junk that we love, which, again, I just don't feel like we get in other games. If you could, like, launch an attack at me while I'm here-ish.
Yeah, like for me, I've just destroyed a load of the teeth that are there. Yet,
you've taken out an entire chunk of the island. Like, holy shit! Now, not every map is quite this destructive, but it kind of gets the point across. How do you feel about the maps in general? The variety and the quality.
I think this map was a very needed addition. It feels fresh. In general, I have the same complaint I have for a lot of the games just need more generic maps. I feel like, again, like a generic ice planet map, or just a generic alien planet, which Tenkaichi 3 already had. But I will say, the maps that are here are of a genuinely really good quality. There's a lot of destruction.
What's your favourite? I'm a big fan of the city maps.
City Evening.
I like throwing kaiju through buildings.
I think City Evening is my favourite map in this.
Super attacks are all amazingly animated and flashy, and it's never not a treat for the eyes.
I think I accidentally just rose up in it.
On the other hand, controls are frustrating, the expected reaction time for most hand-to-hand actions being just unreasonable, at least I feel so, and combos are kinda repetitive across the whole roster. Plus, I almost forgot to add the all-too-recurring problem of rush-style super or ult attacks simply not colliding with the target, blatantly just sliding off and round the hitbox in a way which only these type of attacks do, really making having these equipped a straight-up liability over good old reliable beams. Nothing beats those.
I don't know how I was hit by that.
Charge attacks never land. What the fuck?
That was a fucking ice age.
Like you had like a million years to dodge stuff. Okay, let's try that again.
Combat system in general, I'm going to be totally honest with you. So I am going to say this for the more better at Dragon Ball games people that are watching. I am not the best at Dragon Ball games. I love playing them. I've played them since I was a kid. I'm not the best at them.
Nor am I.
So we're thoroughly unqualified. We just make videos about Dragon Ball. I will say, it's definitely faster paced than Tenkaichi 3. Visually, it looks better than Tenkaichi 3 a lot of the time. I'll give it that. Again, I just wish moves have had a bit more of a dramatic ending to them, which I know for a fact is not original criticism on my part. It's something that loads of other people have said.
The actual control system is a real. I mean, if you have the time to dedicate yourself to like perfecting it, it'll be fine. You'll get to grips with it eventually. But I still to this day cannot figure out like a lot of. Okay, the worst example is backshots, for lack of a better term. The amount of times I am just locked in by the AI, especially in just you. Oh, they have gotten behind you. They are now going to be punching you in the lower spine, and you are just going to be there until they get bored. And unless you have an evasive skill on your character, good luck. Now, while this might be the best looking Dragon Ball game at its best, only Fighter Z giving it any competition in that area, and I do adore the destructible environments, the vibrant colours, and the top-notch character models they've been able to recreate here, it is also painfully inconsistent in the animation department, ranging from movie-level fluidity and framing to mocapped cutscenes with an air of Christopher Lloyd's character from Food Fight about them.
You must be Leonard, the manager.
Oh, look at that swagger. I have some very negative things to say about the animations in this game when they're doing mocap, and it's really obvious mocap. It's ass mocap. But like in the combat, in actual like ultimate attacks and stuff like that, the game can be very pretty. I remember back when the game was coming out, people were saying like, oh, how could people say that Fighters is the best looking Dragon Ball game? This puts Fighters to shame. And a lot of the time, it kind of does. But what Fighters has is like a consistent art style. This does not. It's really quite bad sometimes and really, really pretty other times.
There's something very Gary's mod about sparking Zero at times that never really happens in Fighters. Like, a lot of the time you'll just see someone, again, I'm sure we say this all the time, the weird food fight animations where it's just someone flapping their arms around, or Hercule looking like he's being reanimated by some sort of necromancer.
Yeah, it's really off-putting, and it makes the story mode even less engaging than it already is, because when you don't have the PowerPoint presentations, you have these like fan animation Gary's Mod ragdolls being like moved around. There's no emotion behind like Gohan. Oh no, my dad's just died. I've doomed the world. Cell's alive.
And you can tell like, it's a 40-year-old man just walking about, stumbling, in a
slapping his hands on the ground. It's odd. What was that? Very good. On to something more positive, I suppose. The roster.
I don't like the fact that, like OG Dragon Ball, is basically completely omitted from the roster.
I mean, I suppose we could just talk about the roster for a start. I'm pretty happy with it. Obviously, as always, there are gaps, but I feel like I would be a bit hypocritical to not to say like, hey, you did give me King Cold, you did give me every version of Cell, you know, things that I was asking Xenoverse 2 for, and complaining about Xenoverse 2 for lacking. But it's still pretty clear where their biases are. You know, 37 different versions of Goku and Vegeta, but no original Dragon Ball. And Super, it's good to see Super getting some love, but still a lot of missing character transformations, you know? I mean, on screen we're playing as Cooler and Frieza right now, with all forms, including Mecha Frieza and Mecha Cooler and all this, but no other version of Frost?
Yeah, we've had the Frost conversation so many times at this point. Like, Frost, for some reason, they absolutely hate putting any of his other forms in, even though his like big xenomorph head form literally has moves that they could pull from, and that's not even an excuse. Like, King Cold doesn't have fucking anything to pull from. We've had this, like, but they're able to put King Cold in like 2 of the Tenkaichi games if you include this and 3.
A bit of creative license is completely fine. I really do love how transformations and fusions are implemented in here, freely hopping essentially between different characters entirely mid-mission, for some dramatic flair or pre-planned cinematic moments. Gotta say it, Kefla totally became one of my favourites to play in this game, and thank God for her base form being in here. Her objectively best look. Stupid Super Saiyan pineapple hair. To be honest though, the area I've definitely got the most playtime out of spaffing Zoidberg so far has been the episode editor. Creating your own missions, complete with cutscenes and dialogue, was one of the biggest selling points, at least for me. Yeah, my disappointment then at the, in retrospect, pretty obvious reveal that we would not be allowed to write in our own dialogue from scratch was a bit of a strike against it, but obviously I know why. There was a 0% chance that giving the players the freedom to write their own text would not result in an immediate recreation of Frieza says the N-word. Yeah, okay, fair enough. But surely there's a better way of doing it than this. So, how about those custom missions?
Oh god, you fucking lumped that on.
The selection of possible phrases is not actually the problem, with some 5,000 plus lines to choose from pre-selected in this whole list. With enough creativity and patience, any reasonably straightforward storyline could be thrown together. Whether about King Cold looking for old man love, clergyman Bojack bringing the light of the Lord to the demon realm, or what if Majin Buu was in Universe 6? Strike 2 against it, however, would be the total lack of any useful filter or any search function for sorting through these lines. I repeat, over 5,000! Until you've had the joy of staring unblinkingly at a screen for 45 minutes, scanning for a single line of dialogue you were certain you'd seen earlier, don't tell me it's fit for purpose.
I don't even know where to fucking begin. So, not only can you not put in your own fucking text, you can't even search for the text that they want you to use.
It's
diabolical.
Like the most tedious system, isn't it? We have both created missions, by the way, and by the way, just so you know, I will share both of our missions, the codes, so people can find them if they want. They're out there, and I will say, I think we've both put quite a lot of effort in, but it takes hours, sometimes tens of hours. I think I must have spent several afternoons on one of my missions for what is it, like 5 minutes of gameplay. It's 12 scenes or something. It's 12 slides manually searching amongst 5,140 odd lines.
It's not very good. It's not the most well thought together system. I like that they have loads of different features for like triggering things optionally or automatically. I like all of that. There is a good thing there, but the way they've gone about implementing like the UI of it is just fucked completely. For one line of dialogue, it will just say like, oh, you've got 1,000 different options to pick from. And then you'll go to the second one, and it'll be like, oh, you've got 800 to pick from.
Oh my god, yeah.
And it's like, they will fucking, like, seemingly, if I'm not going insane, they just randomly decide that you can't use some options anymore for this particular
Here is a completely arbitrary, dumb example of what you're saying here. Which I know from yesterday when I was working on one of my missions that I was doing for fun. There's a line of dialogue which is like an internal monologue of, "This is bad. There'll be no stopping blank now." Now that's a pretty generic line. You could put almost anything in there. "Oh, this is bad. There'll be no stopping anorexic Boo now. Oh, this is bad. There'll be no stopping Chi-Chi now." You know, who knows what. But you know what the options are? Only, like, verbs. There's no... You can't insert any character name for some of the 5,000 plus lines of dialogue that are, like, words that you could use. They go arbitrarily. Nope, only these 20 words are acceptable. And it's things like, "Oh no, there'll be no stopping dinner now. Oh no, there'll be no stopping a nice guy now. Oh no, there'll be no stopping work now." It's nonsense.
It's like the most useless fucking shit that you're never going to want to use.
It seems that zero thought was put into how this would be utilised, practically speaking. And I say this as someone who has absolutely put the time and effort into this system. Trust me, I have wasted far too many hours of my life trying to get 2 characters to exchange less than a dozen lines of dialogue. It's dog shit. In any case, if you want to see what missions Sam or myself have cooked up, I'll share the mission codes, or whatever they're called, on screen now. A lot of total nonsense here, but some sincere actual effort in others, with multi-phased battles, mid-battle cutscenes, and all sorts of dynamic shit that the otherwise pretty decent scripting system actually allows. Look, in theory, it's not bad, it just desperately needs a search function, and, for that matter, a lot more flexibility. I suppose it's only tangentially related, but I also have to say that the main menu UI is absolute ass. I hate it. And likewise riddled with awkward mocap. Plus, as someone who has had to do a lot of hopping in-game quickly to record this or that and then hop back out again, the simple act of quitting the desktop takes far too fucking long, having to back out through menu after menu after menu right back to the title screen. End of the day, I just don't think Spanking Weeboo has the breadth or depth of content to keep me interested for anywhere near the length of time that either Xenoverse game did. I'll still probably have the occasional fun battle with friends, or even put myself through more custom episode pain. You know, I got a complete Feather Bojack story after all, but for the most part, I'm basically tapped out. And until working on this review, to be honest, I'd tapped out almost by the end of its release month. Anything else?
I'm having too much fun with it.
Yeah, I know.
So, for me, I would probably still find myself going back to this game occasionally, as I am right now. There are other games and other Dragon Ball games I'd rather play, like one of the older Budokai games or one of the other Tenkaichi games, because to be honest, again, they have the roster that I prefer. A lot of the times I'm playing a game like this for the roster.
Have you played any online with randoms?
I think I've tried it once or twice, and
how's that been?
I think randos are a lot better than me. I'm not particularly the best at this game's online. I think I will say that at launch, this game's networking was fucking terrible, but they've seemed to have ironed that out now. Yeah, this game's online, in my view, did launch in a pretty poor state. Like, any match that I would play with like a mate, it would just fucking slow down to a crawl. If your frame rates weren't like perfectly matching, sometimes the game would just half the frame rate, seemingly, even though your PC was fine. Again, a lot of Dragon Ball games nowadays seem to be focusing more on being like a long-term game. So, just keep updating this game with more and more maps and more characters. And I think this isn't just a Sparking Zero thing. I think for Dragon Ball games, this is a major issue that needs to be addressed. Do not feel afraid to add content relating to original Dragon Ball. It's one of your best properties, and it just kind of remains very sat on and done nothing with. I don't know, I would have loved a story mode for this that had like OG Dragon Ball. Fucking hell, like just having like the King Piccolo fight, which Kakarot did. Have that as like the intro fight if you want. If you don't really feel like any others are applicable, which I think is wrong.
I like the world martial arts tour.
Oh my god, I nearly completely forgot to mention this.
Probably my favourite game mode, honestly, is just doing randomised matches with your character of choice against who fucking knows what. Yeah,
World Martial Arts Tournament is like the best fucking game mode in this. It kind of is in any game that it's in, but I love playing it in this, randomising which like character you pick, and having to just, like, the Yamcha games one is one that I quite like playing. I love just having to slum it with whatever character the game decides to give you.
Who's gonna kamikaze the other one first? Who's gonna kill the other one first? Oh, I wanna kill myself. Do I wanna kill myself? Let me die! Just let me die!
No! He's killing him!
Your turn, I guess.
See you, chump.
Alright, on the bright side, from this point on in the video, we are on the upswing. All games I unquestionably liked more than not. But before we get to our top games proper, I have something maybe a little bit different, but still absolutely deserves a mention. Fallout London. Okay, while strictly not a game in its own right, this fan-made mod for 2015's Fallout 4, good lord, it's been a decade, was certainly one of my highlights from last year, and a bit of a landmark release in and of itself that I couldn't round up my 2024 without at least giving it a mention. My sense online has been that Full On has acquired a little bit of a divisive reputation. Undeniably impressive to most, but the inherent shakiness of the engine and the excessive loopholes required just to get the damn thing running have left a bit of a mark. Entirely the fault of Bethesda, I do say, for straight up breaking Fallout 4 with its so-called next-gen update shortly before Full On was due to be launched, while for lore nuts and canon disciples, the fan fictitiousness of it has made it a bit of an outcast. I mean, you know how Fallout fans can be when arguing over the validity of canon entries in the series. Now imagine a high-profile fan game with Doctor Who actors and a mention on BBC News. But all of this, just to say that, in my opinion, London is the best entry in the series since New Vegas. Fight me. Team Full On managed to create a story which near perfectly captures the feel of a classic Fallout game without resorting to a single appearance of super mutants, mention of the Brotherhood of Steel, or appearance of Vault Boy, featuring wholly original factions, conflicts, and technologies, while remaining fully at home within the same world of the official entries. While traditional Fallouts are firmly at home satirising Americana and exploring the depths of failure of the pre-war American government and post-war factions rising to replace it, Full On deals with uniquely British conflicts through the same Fallout lens, exploring social class and hierarchy in groups and out, as a ruling gentry claim ownership of London from the walled-off and gated city of Westminster, served and protected from the poverty and war of the outside by a conscripted army of working-class Tommies. All the while other groups vie to wrest control from this decrepit institution, for better or for worse. Now, I can't talk about anything else before first just applauding the sheer quality of the work on display. This recreation and reimagining of a retro-futuristic war-ravaged London is nothing short of extraordinary, both eerily recognisable yet immensely imaginative. The keep calm and carry on era of Britain is ripe for this Fallout brand satire. For the first few hours, I was hard-pressed trying to find any reused Fallout 4 asset which didn't feel out of place. Everything from computer terminals and weapons, EM2 my beloved, to masonry and even the sky felt distinctly British, or at least distinctly distinct from Fallout 4's Boston. Even the more creative liberties, of which, as a stickler for lore myself, I expected to wince at, ended up feeling strangely natural. I have already incorporated Ion Brew into my Fallout-themed D&D campaign. Now, it's not without flaws by any stretch, and these go well beyond the aforementioned technical issues. Being a fan-made project with obviously a lot of people involved and a lot of moving pieces, there is a bit of a problem with cohesive direction and vision. There's a bit of a quality control issues where one dungeon or mission will be really high polished, almost weirdly so, like it was a different mod entirely stitched onto the back of this one, which in some cases they just were, while other missions feel like they don't really exist in the same universe. I do get a sense that the development team was maybe a bit compartmentalized, where like this group would work on this area, this group will work on this area, and there wasn't too much communication between, where you end up with one borough which has like a totally distinct vibe and tone to another, and absolutely no quest or lore connection. Now, in general, this isn't too much of a problem. What happens in Good Springs doesn't have any effect on what happens in Prim or Novak, after all. But this overall problem does echo through, especially into the last act of the main story. You see, when I think back to my time with the game, where I was genuinely absorbed almost more than anything else that year, The first two acts were near perfect as we explore these war-ravaged streets of Old Blighty, seeking answers to our origin and the identity of the individual named Smythe, as well as the secret government agency known as Angel. The real drop-in points come with the final act, which, barring an awesome final battle upon the walled city of Westminster, was pretty poorly done. Besides for Angel, who are effectively the Institute or Enclave primary antagonists, though you can join them, of this game, Folon does a pretty poor job of introducing the other major players you can choose from. 60 hours previously, I'd met a gang called the Vagabonds and did all their stuff. I met a town of fishfolk on the Thames. Later on, I'd meet a gang of old school mods, anarchist punks, skinheads, and even bloody druids, but like I was saying, none of these groups felt connected to each other, and none of them had a thing to say about the literal fascists or the Renaissance Festival troupe, who were apparently at war and I was expected to choose between. Now, because I've read a book, I could infer that the group calling themselves the Fifth Column, based on Cable Street and parading around in black and brown shirts, were probably unchill. Meanwhile, because I've played a Fallout game, I could infer that the chivalric knight cosplayers calling themselves the Knights of Camelot were probably the intended goodies. The problem was that so little within the game narrative until this point actually told me any of this information, even as I tried to gain entry to the respective bases for a chat before the final act. But no, you don't learn shit about them until you're already being presented with the 3 mutually exclusive quests on who to side with, each of which immediately cut off any chance to hear the sales pitches of the other 2 factions. The Fifth Column are too ideological to be reasoned with, claims Arthur of Camelot only after committing to his group. Oh, ideology? I say, please elaborate. Well, they're fascist, see? Ah, so they're authoritarians of a hyper-conservative nature seeking return to an imagined glorious past with possible revanchist policies, militarized and stratified, characterized by class collaboration, division of gender roles, rejection of perceived degeneracy outside these norms, and a culture of in-group, out-group dynamics along lines of race or nationality, typically investing political power onto a strongman ideologue claiming to represent a pseudo-populist common will over genuine democratic representation? Ah, well, they wear black and have a dog called Oswald. Pretty sussy, right? So yeah, New Vegas' unparalleled faction interplay and depth this is not, despite the obvious attempts to ape, but everything else around and until the fetch quest, do as you're told by faction leader final stretch, was just too damn good, with side quests and companions on par or above so much from Bethesda's own games. And you know what, as for the technical issues, I'll just say that for myself, it was never that much of a problem, and I managed to get through the game fine without really any crashes. Not to invalidate other people's inability to get it running, but for me, the bigger problem was the excessive load times, which after a while, especially as the, save file began to accumulate, started to dissuade me from any unnecessary fast travel or exploration of interiors, at which point I was kinda just bum rushing the main quest to get the game done, giving up on all side quests. Even so, I'm gonna undoubtedly give Full On the same kind of repeat playthroughs as any other Fallout. I only hope that siding with Angel, with their flawless trip, provides a distinctly different third act. I'll give it a couple more years for sure, but should Landon call, I'll be back. Black Myth Wukong. Alright, hate to break it to you right away, but I'm not going to have a ton to say on this one in particular, because I got so far in, hit a boss I was struggling with, looked online for advice, and saw one too many. Whoa, if you think that boss is hard, you're gonna hate the one that comes after. Okay then, I'm just gonna play something else. What? Wait, no, that's not- Yeah, no, if the game's attitude is gonna be perpetual one-upmanship, then I'ma just tap out now while I still have some positive feelings about the whole experience. I've done more than enough playthroughs of Elden Ring, and I'm still pretty all-round burnt out on Souls games, and honestly, didn't really feel that this one was all that standout to begin with to justify another hour after hour session of waiting for that attempt where we'd luck our way through just to repeat the process on the next boss. Sorry, we're beginning on a negative foot here. Let's get to the actual review. Black Myth Wukong, by Chinese developer Game Science, tells a mostly original, or at least reimagined, sequel story to the classic 16th century Chinese novel Journey to the West, taking place after the titular journey in which Son Goku and friends collected the 7 Dragon Balls. With the always rebellious Monkey King having returned from his quest, imprisoned once again by the forces of heaven for being too based, lousy elixir pilled, and basically hacking reality to become an unstoppable living cartoon character. This, for those unfamiliar with the character, is really not even an exaggeration. Fast forwarding an amount of time, and another practically identical monkey quests out from Wukong's mountain to recover 6 relics of the Monkey King, becoming more powerful and more like Wukong himself as he goes. Now, the promise of a Chinese mythology-inspired Souls-like was, at the very least, worthy of an intrigued, oh? Not least for all the hours my beloved wife has sat me through the 1980s Wukong TV show, in much the same way I force her to watch my nostalgic childhood tat. Unfortunately, that intrigued, oh, quickly became an exhausted, ugh, when I realised I'd have to play yet another Souls game. So enough beating around the bush. Did I like it? At least for what I played, and would I recommend it as a fresh Souls experience in the post-Elden Ring world? Meh. And meh. Even ignoring my aforementioned fatigue on the genre, I just can't say it scratched any of the itches that really make games like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, or Elden Ring, even in all their occasional, or in Elden Ring's case, regular frustration, nevertheless enjoyable to me. Playing around with builds, finding and upgrading gear, satisfying exploration, and methodical, mechanically engaging combat. These aren't necessarily what define a Soulsborne as a genre, but they are what I personally put myself through them for. Hell, I could take or leave other genre staples like losing resources on death or incomprehensible co-op matchmaking, neither of which are present in this game, by the way, if that makes any difference to your personal acknowledgement of it as a true Soulsborne or not. But Black Myth's lacking of elements I want from these games, in lieu of only the aggressive, challenging bosses, was an absence sorely felt. The exploration, insofar as I got, was lacking. Admittedly, the world feels a bit more interesting and sprawling, and actually possible to get lost in by the second chapter, which gave me some hope that things would improve with time. That first region, though, was a bad start, reminding me of the most linear sections of Dark Souls 2. Forest of Fallen Giants comes to mind, as we just follow the straight and narrow path, with very little to turn off from and discover. And absolutely nothing in the way of looping connectivity or shortcuts. No need, when we just have bog standard fast travel from the get-go. While the game looks gorgeous, Wukong is a terrible offender for graphical realism over game sense, as we render near photorealistic forest or desert or mountain, but need to haphazardly implement invisible walls to prevent the player from roaming off into what looks like a natural path. Actually, this is just the most immediately obvious in a trend of poor polish and just countless little things here and there, too small to really, make much of a note of individually, but as an accumulative effect, harm the feel of the game as a whole. Like, example, which I only remembered because I found it amongst my recorded clips, while evading archer spam through a Rakgwai-infested village, I discovered a new location, and was forced into a slow walk, while the location discovered text took over the whole screen, nearly killing me. Build and character customization, possibly my number one thing for Souls games, is all but non-existent. Sure, there are outfits you can collect, and upgrades to Wukong's staff, but these are almost entirely gated linearly behind bosses, meaning that, nope, there's no sneaking around Stormvale Castle to go grab some build essential items early on, or any kind of experimentation to be done. You simply get what you're given in the specified order. There is, mind you, a skill tree to tweak your abilities and stats within the narrow confines that the game allows, but even among the modern trend of overly convoluted skill trees, Black Myth takes the piss. Look, just give me a skill point to increase light attack damage. I don't know how consuming less stamina while healing during sprint with one focus point active is necessarily gonna help me. Do I choose to slightly reduce might decay when transformed, or slightly increase might retained when detransformed? Also, Follow-up question, what is might? The combat itself is okay, but I just don't enjoy the feeling of perpetual underpoweredness. Which sounds insane, it's a Wukong game, but while the spells and tricks and transformations at your disposal are fun and useful and can tip the tide of battle, they are also so limited that you can barely pull 2 or 3 spells out per fight before running flat out of magic juice, forcing you right back to tickling the boss's health bar with your staff, building up for heavy attacks, and then missing these half the time because the fucker won't stay still. It incentivizes you to hold off on any special, key-consuming abilities until you've already softened them up quite a bit through regular melee. Bosses generally getting more aggressive as their health reduces, and let's not even talk about multi-phase bastards, but the thing is, I just don't find this melee all that fun. At the moment I'm out of juice, especially once the low health boss starts zooming around, denying me any openings, I feel so often completely useless. Now, the world itself is something I can rave about.
There are actually 2 bells of awakening.
The art style, creature designs, wonderful artistic codex entries, and even these beautiful animated segments at times, retelling stories from Wukong's original quest, were all really neat. While the gross, sickly look of everything falls firmly into the camp of likewise derivative from software dark fantasy clones, but where it departs from its many contemporaries is in the abundance of life in this world, with the occasional side quest from some little wolf guy or horse man or who knows what, just living their best Yao Guai lives. While I was playing with the native Chinese audio, I missed out on a lot of the enemy voice lines and banter, though they made my wife chuckle, so presumably they were just shit-talking her simian ass. Which I suppose brings me to my last real point, something which overall left me enjoying my time with Black Myth, even if not directly the game's fault. Sitting cross-legged on the floor next to Uni, her cheering me on as we tried to beat some snake dude or rock monster or giant bear. Even if I've binned the game off, at least for the time being, no amount of frustrating tiger guy can take those positive experiences away from me. The real irony here is that while I am sitting here complaining about Souls fatigue, this experience took me back to a few years ago when I first really started getting into these games. Me and Sam visiting each other's house and playing Dark Souls 1 for the first time. That real in-person, tangible gaming experience. You know, it's something we do miss a lot. It's not quite the same when you're just streaming or playing over Discord, but just having someone sitting there with you, especially someone who themselves is a massive Wukong fan, totally into this world, giving me kind of explanations or their own fan theorying on who this person is, who this boss is meant to be. And yeah, sure, I never finished the game, I don't know when or if I ever will, but on the whole, I still am glad I played it. Do I recommend it then? Entirely depends on your own feelings on the genre in general, your own patience for the faster types of bosses. We're talking like Final Third Elden Ring, I would say. What's his face? Malakath. Malakath? No. That's an Elder Scrolls character. Who am I thinking of? Malekith. Basically the same thing. Another like real never stand still, jumping around the map. It's an incredibly mobile game. You have to be chasing after these fuckers. And yes, sure, learn their attack patterns, blah-de-blah-de-blah, well, everyone says, but I'm over learning attack patterns. I tried to learn the attack patterns. I honestly am paying attention and doing my utmost, but I don't want to spend all of my free time learning attack patterns. I just want to play a good story. So yeah, that's my final thoughts. Monkey. Yeah. Mouthwashing was a September 2024 psychological horror by Swedish development team Wrong Organ. Based in Stockholm, Sweden. It costs $10.99 GBP. That's a Great British Pound Sterling at the time of writing. On the platform, Steam. Developed and owned by Valve. Mouthwashing. It's a it's a video game. Did I mention that already? It uses a combination of polygons and texture meshes, right? Along with animations for its characters to tell a story. Okay, I have no fucking idea where to start with this one. And yet somehow, it's really good. Mouthwashing is a 2-hour short story with more punch and guts, take that how you will, than half the AAA epics on this list. Telling the harrowing, non-linear tale of the Pony Express delivery vessel Tulper, left adrift in deep space after an accident with 5 stressed, anxious, and increasingly paranoid crew, as well as 100,000 or so bottles of mouthwash in the cargo bay. Jumping between the lead up to, day of, and months following the accident, the player switches perspective between Captain Curly, I survived because the fire inside me burned brighter than the fire around, and also the painkillers, Carling, and co-pilot Jimmy, we don't talk about Jimmy, Both characters' respective interactions with each other and the rest of the crew, mechanic Swansea, apprentice Tasuki, and medic Anya, unveiling more about their characters and actions elsewhere in the timeline. Now, given how short and contained the story is, I can't really say much about it without stepping on spoilers, but just know that it ain't exactly a fun time, but it's still somehow really good. The meat of the game is a series of puzzles, finding and utilising tools around the ship, uncovering codes, cooking up birthday cakes. You know, it's a happy fun party time sort of game. Nothing mortifying to be found here.
Please, don't hurt me, Data.
Okay, so what can I safely talk about? The art style, for one, is on point. I, for one, can't see myself getting tired of this renaissance of PS1 style retro graphics, at least not when it's being done so well and to such great effect. Coupled with fantastic lighting and well-designed character models, the limitation of the art style and its almost inherent off-putting crunchiness really adds to the intended discomfort. On the characters, you need only take one look at Anya or Swansea in all their low-fidelity glory to know pretty much all you need to about them as people. Take a second look at Anya and maybe think twice about releasing her as an Nendoroid figure. You know, let's depict the by as a cute little piece of plastic marketable tat. I don't know, maybe just something to take into consideration. Anyway, what were we talking about? Yeah, the game just has a great vibe, is certainly the wrong word. The vibes are all sorts of wrong, but just the look, feel, visuals, writing, tone of desperation, the tension mounting as our shifting timeline perspectives converge, piecing together the sequence of events leading to tragedy. Sure, the gameplay is almost token, with maybe only 3 or 4 particularly memorable set pieces or puzzles, beyond the point-and-click adventure, find item X to use on object Y. But while the ship environment is limited in size, the way we play with its changing state as we hop back and forth through time, that allows us to almost suss puzzles out fourth-dimensionally. Or at least, certainly, we can begin to suss the story out that way. Mouthwashing is a really hard game to even talk about. Just play it. Only though, so long as you have a sturdy stomach and a tolerance for sensitive subject matter. So, a tentative but pretty strong recommendation. Starstruck Vagabond. After plugging his game every chance he got over the past year, I finally decided to take a look into what YouTuber and game critic Yahtzee Croshaw, aka Semi-Ramblomatic, aka Zero Punctuation, aka Benjamin, had cooked up in his latest indie project. While I haven't played any of his previous games, I've followed his review content for years, so I thought to expect from this space adventure plenty of dry, witty, mildly adult humour, Red Dwarf references, and Britishisms. What we got was, well, all of the above. That plus snake titties.
Sniddies.
After a well-paced and comprehensive prologue tutorial setting up the basics of starship maintenance, the galaxy, and our place within it, as a captain of the Earth Federation stuck in a war between humanity and the wretched bots of the machine consciousness, the game quickly rug pulls to reveal its true nature. It's a space trucker simulator.
You'll be responsible for ensuring that the cargo reaches its destination. So I'm gonna be a delivery boy? Exactly.
While there is an overarching story driving events, hanging like a giant purple egg at the centre of your universe at all times, most of what you'll be doing is honest blue-collar labour. Package deliveries, home cleaning, wreck salvaging, illegal waste dumping, that sort of thing. The gameplay loop is remarkably simple but effective. Do work, make money, upgrade ship to become more effective at doing work, make more money, and it was, for me at least, frighteningly addictive. I started the game on a Saturday night and completed it on that Tuesday morning with 26 hours on the clock, most ship upgrades, and 4 out of 5 of my companions had either 3 or 4 hearts of affection level. More on that in a bit. While virtually devoid of combat, unless you count beating alien slimes to death with a rock, the mechanical challenge is all in system and resource management, with your captain's stamina being the primary resource for nearly every action you can take. Welding shut holes in the hull, topping up fuel, carting crates around, all bite into this little green bar, limiting how much you can get done before your next mandated biscuit break. Simple enough, most of the time, but when you're carrying spoilable refrigerated cargo, have just struck an asteroid, are rapidly losing both power and oxygen, and have to manually pry open every bulkhead between you and the problem, you're gonna wish you hadn't skipped breakfast. Yahtzee's writing style and sense of humour really jives with me, though I feel I need to warn that if absurdist, almost non-sequitur type humour isn't your thing, you might get annoyed. This game does pull the same gag of, you thought this thing we said was important was actually important? Well, joke's on you, it's completely irrelevant, like 4 times in the main story alone. Humour, though, obviously hard to critique, being super subjective. But if there is any area where I think it's safe to say the game did struggle the most, which I'll just get out of the way now, I think that the jobs you can do will quickly start to feel repetitive. In particular, any answered distress calls, which very quickly boil down to just 1 of 3 possible scenarios. 4 in the beta quadrant with the horrible red weed stuff. I thankfully only played after a major post-launch patch though, as before this point there were only 2 possible events. And even post-patch, I quickly found myself just ignoring these distress signals unless doing so for a specific objective. Every planet too feels a bit too samey, these little pallet town vignettes with some same combination of bulletin board, trade post, maybe one of either a hairdresser, fashion store or pub. I'm not expecting fully fleshed out worlds and cities and cultures and civilizations, of course, but I thought at least each of these 4 galactic quadrants might have a little bit of a different vibe going on. Unique alien races or architecture style instead of just a monoculture complete with the same identical corporate branch on every other planet. There for if you want to do any planetary surveying jobs on the side. But where this game really shines, where its heart clearly lies, is in its many potential crewmate characters. Each of these weirdos' introductions and stories being seamlessly and unexpectedly woven into both the standard blue-collar gameplay and wider galactic plot. Crucially, this is not side content. This is the game. Starstruck Vagabond being about your relationships with others. And yes, that of course does include relationships. Mr. Croshaw knows what the degenerates want. He's one of us.
What's not to love about big titty snakes?
Nothing.
If you're already sold on the game, by the way, I'd actually skip the rest of this review. Not because of plot spoilers, it's really not that sort of game, but I think anything I actually say from this point on might just pull the curtain back just enough on what's going on behind the scenes that I might actually spoil the illusion for first-time players. So, there are 9 recruitable characters across the galaxy. However, only 5 can ever be encountered per run, which 5 being seemingly random, dependent on what triggers you trip over through the course of your day jobs. Now, I'll admit, I was really quite disappointed when I discovered this, 20 hours in, knowing that 1 or 2 of my limited crew positions were now filled with what, in Mass Effect terms, I refer to as stay-on-the-ship characters. while I had been waiting in vain the entire time for the now doomed appearance of the snake lady that was promised.
I'm not saying I would have sex with a snake. I'm just saying that I can understand the aesthetics of a snake woman.
That said, I can take this dice roll element for the sake of the excellent surprise factor this adds. Everyone's first run likely to be different, while never knowing what nonsense you might trigger by walking into the next pub or answering the next distress signal. It ends up creating an incredible, tailored, episodic format to your playthrough, complete with a fresh title reveal each time to indicate you've unknowingly stumbled into a new quest line. You know, you'll be in the middle of your usual Tuesday, dumping barrels of toxic waste on the nearest uninhabited planet, when BAM! A space cop pops out to announce you're under arrest for fly tipping. Cut to a slow zoom on the captain's concerned face, fade to black, opening title, resume plot. And these episodic little adventures, at least all the ones that I've gotten so far, have been really good. Okay, it's still the standard get from A to B to C gameplay, but it's the writing and humour and actual heart, sometimes literal physical hearts, which carry them. And, more importantly, integrating these adventures into the meat and potatoes gameplay, rather than something to go out of your way to recruit, make these crewmates truly feel like an organic part of your adventure. Not something optional, affixed to the side for a bit of company, but as much a part of the plot as you are. It's extremely well handled, and I cannot begin to imagine the pain of writing NPC dialogue and banter for every possible crew complement combination and acquisition order, including commentary on each other's respective storylines, not to mention the different iterations of the player character's own dialogue and interactions with crew depending on their own predefined personality type during the prologue. Yahtzee's take on the D&D alignment chart, only with scales of upbeat to bitter, egotistic to altruistic. Besides just a different flavour to your character's dialogue, certain crewmates will only gel, romance included, with certain personality types. The bitterly apathetic Invisible Man getting nothing out of hanging around a bitter, apathetic player, for instance, while Valley Girl Snake Lady don't fuck with no upbeat altruists. Which, in retrospect, is just as well she never met Captain Maxwell Stone. He was too damn pure for her. I really enjoyed my time with this one, and while I definitely need a long break away, can 100% see myself going back and giving it another run for, hopefully, some of those other crewmates I never encountered.
2 titty bumps and then a smooth transition down to hips.
I always try and think, where are we going to go with Windbreaker? Like, what are we venturing into? And it wasn't Snitties.
Fallen Aces. Hey, talk about goon games. Goons all over the shop here in Switchblade City, see? I'm really tempted to do the rest of this review in this voice. That's the bet. This was an absolute palate cleanser of a game for me this past year. It's been something I've been quite happily just dipping in and out of. You know, when playing something a bit too heavy, go beat up some goons. Playing something a bit too taxing on my energy or mental capacity, beat up some goons. Playing as a detective in this retro comic book styled noir beat 'em up. That's it. That's all the story synopsis you need, because being completely honest, I didn't give a crap about the plot. And not caring did no harm whatsoever to my enjoyment of this rotoscope animation freeform explorative beat-em-up immersive sim. Broken up into chapters, each a sandbox in and of themselves, the amount of freedom the player has to reach and achieve their objective is what really makes this game. You're dropped into a chunk of city with back streets, sewers, vent shafts and fire escapes all to get around, sneak around, or get the drop on unexpected mobs of mob. Almost any interactable object can be a weapon, from cinder blocks to trash can lids and lead pipes to banana peels. I'm going to be using that word from the Star Wars Outlaws review again, improvisational. That's the key here, as item durability quickly forces you to discard and grab something new to swing or lob at an oncoming crook. Now, while there is a decent chunk of game available to play, Fallen Aces does come with the heavy caveat of being an ever-ambitious, episodic release. Oh, we sure love those, don't we? Just ask Half-Life 2 how it worked out for them. As such, only episode 1 of an, at present, 3-episode roadmap is complete and available to actually play beginning to end. While I reckon you could bum rush through the entire current offering, ignoring most exploration and just mashing your way through goons, in as little as 3 hours, given my own time played on Steam came in at the surprisingly low 4.4 hours, this nevertheless absolutely does have that replay quality, finding different ways to get through each of these chapters, doing challenge runs like the, I think it's Mission 4, optional stealth objective, make sure there's no bodies to be found. Or, you know, see how far through the game you can get carrying just rat. Anyway, I'm suddenly aware that I'm completely out of things to talk about in this game. Again, not for any lack of interest on my part, I just think it is one of those titles which strives entirely on its simplicity, doing a handful of things to a really high polish, the art style, the brawling combat system, and the exploration encouraging map design. Yeah, that's it. It's really good. Rat.
There are some supplies back there you can use. Take whatever you like. Leave me alone!
Still wakes the deep. The novelty of playing a horror game set in the almost exact environment I was professionally involved in for years, albeit set in a time era before both me and clearly before modern health and safety policies.
You can't throw fucking tools down from a level like that. Yeah, that's an outrage.
Was easily enough to secure my interest in this North Sea oil rig Lovecraftian story. So, while I may not have had a clue knowing what I was going into besides said novelty, what Still Wakes ends up being was a phenomenally acted and presented eldritch body horror, half story-centric walking sim, half alien isolation hide-and-seek anxiety. And it was pretty fucking good. Set aboard a drilling platform off the coast of Scotland, husband, father, and active fugitive from the police, Kaz McCleary, struggles to keep the oil rig together and crewmates alive under the most damning and psychologically straining conditions imaginable. Things get even worse later when horrible monsters show up. Offshore work is a waking nightmare. Having drilled too greedily and too deep, some unknowable entity is awoken, gradually and gruesomely assimilating all aboard the platform and warping the very fabric of the world around it. Former colleagues become deformed, tentacled freaks stalking the decks, absorbed and subjected to the will of the entity. While very much on the short side, Still Wakes achieves everything it sets out to. While you might expect little more than a horror-themed walking sim, it doles out just enough platforming, puzzles, and tense cat-and-mouse monster segments to still feel like a proactive survival experience, all while being carried by some stellar voice performances all around, both for characters human and less so. Tension is wisely maintained through excellent use of lighting and weather. A towering gibbo hunting survivors on the top deck strides atop 30-foot tentacles, torso only partly visible through the haar, while smaller stalkers, roaming the darkened gangways and cabin rooms, have the unnerving effect of shorting out Kaz's flashlight whenever the beam would otherwise illuminate them, keeping them forever just that little bit mysterious. Until you look up their models on the wiki after the fact and have a right giggle at T-posing trots, "Would you still love me if I was a worm, Campbell?" Between the horror is a human-centric story about not running from your responsibilities or something, I guess. Oh, and if you're diabetic, make sure you're not an hour of climbing through gibbo-infested catastrophes from your insulin. Yeah, that's the main takeaway. Putting aside length or replay value, my main one criticism would be the lack of memorable, compelling puzzles, the side dish of almost any horror experience. Sure, on one hand, any Spencer Mansion level bullshit would fly in the face of the authentic oil rig setting. "No, Jimmy, I should not have to retrieve the sword key from the giant room of chess pieces in order to access the fire escape. That is beyond a health hazard." But on the other hand, I never felt I was given a chance to really fire those neurons, stretch them thinking muscles, you know? Something beyond, there's a fire blocking your path. Turn the valve to shut off the gas feeding the fire. Okay, you're good. In keeping with the oil rig setting, I could envision something with P&ID schematics, like same valve gas fire scenario, but with a spaghetti junction of pipes and valves, where turning the wrong one will cause disaster, and you've got to track the pipes using the key of symbols matching items in the system, you know, filters and separators and that sort of junk. Or maybe more crane puzzle type stuff. I mean, the world's your oyster with that sort of thing. I might also add that on the PC at least, the default controls are pretty unintuitive. I mean, most of the time this isn't going to be a problem during normal paced puzzling. But if you're being chased by a gibbo, or drowning underwater, or asphyxiating to a gas leak, it's led me to more than a few avoidable deaths, not remembering mid-leap that it's right-click to grab the opposite ledge. Except for when it's left and right-click. Except for when it's hold right-click and press W, you know what I mean? Pulling down an electrical switch, right-click to interact, and S to pull down and away from you. WASD logic, this makes sense to me. Pulling open a padlock with a screwdriver, right-click, and D, less so. Years of Half-Life logic has instilled in me E as the universal turn valve button, but nope, it's D here too. WASD logic, I suppose, because we're turning it to the right, I guess. Anyway, it's a minor gripe. In any case, still, a unique nightmarish game that I thoroughly enjoyed, even if, as a one-and-done experience, I'm not feeling much need to ever go back to. Although, the recent Siren's Rest DLC is on my list of things to get to, and, depending whether this video gets out before or after Halloween, I may have already played. So, while I can't talk about that, the base game at least does come with my pretty hearty recommendation. If not to play, at least give it a watch. Hey, I'm sure there's some streamer out there who's played it for you already.
Ah, Mr. McClary. So glad you could join me, and sorry to have got you out of bed. Shut the door and have a seat.
I'm fine, Stan.
Sit your arse in that chair, you fucking liability.
Helldivers 2. So, an unexpected side effect of, let's call it, taking my time to make this yearly roundup video is how sitting on it for months after the Game Awards season has long since passed, can change your perspective on a game. Like rushing out my previous yearly rankings, often still within the honeymoon period of the games in question, I've certainly made one or two questionable calls, like Fallout 4 being my 2015 top pick. I wouldn't play Bloodborne, for one thing, until much later, and you fucking well know that's my retroactive game of 2015. Or in ranking Horizon Zero Dawn, a game which I have a lot of love for, but have definitely cooled on over the years, above Nier Automata, a 10 out of 10 masterpiece I goddamn revere, which was certainly a choice. Point being, had I made this video for December 24 or January or February 25, where I would normally try to get it out, there's absolutely no doubt that Helldivers 2 would be my enthusiastic-ish game of the year, by default, more or less. It was the obvious pick, the safe pick, one of the few big games I honestly actually played and enjoyed, and I was rooting for it at the Game Awards at the time, decrying why it was relegated to Best Action Game or Best Ongoing amidst slop like Fortnite and Destiny 2, while missing out a GOTY nomination to an expansion pack. All said, sitting here facing down the barrel of 2026, let's just say I can't really muster up much to say about this game. And if enthusiasm is a factor in where I'd rank a game on my list, let's just say, agree or disagree with the positioning, I found myself with a lot more to say about the game which ended up overtaking it. So, Helldivers 2 is Helldivers 2. A cultural phenomenon, a breakout meme machine, a top-tier co-op experience, and you've all already heard and played it yourselves. Like, what am I meant to say? Dropping into combat amidst a galaxy-wide multi-front war as the questionably elite Helldivers, you and up to 3 squad mates are taking on the deadliest missions behind enemy lines to liberate worlds in the name of Super Earth, battling 3, at present, enemy factions: the Bugs, Automatons, and the Illuminate. For whether you want your galactic war to be in Starship Troopers, Terminator, or generically sci-fi alien-flavoured action. Also zombies. The Verhoeven-esque satire and setting is itself a huge part of the fun. At least when you don't have a bitch in your ear telling you how Super Earth are actually the bad guys. It's satire of fascism, the MIC. Yes, we know. We all know. Well, all of us barring the even bigger bitch on the other ear telling you with a straight face that, no, actually, they're the good guys, unironically, because, the streets are clean, and bugs are ugly. You disagree? That's what a bug would say. Shut up. Please, shut the fuck up. I'm honestly not even getting political here. I just think that the game's biggest crime might be the sudden surge of the term media literacy entering the lexicon of people who have yet to master, you know, literacy. It's been 28 years. We don't need to keep relitigating the themes of Starship Troopers. The most intriguing thing about Helldivers, however, even if it also might be its Achilles heel, is the community collaborative real-time aspect to this galactic war. As a truly global multiplayer endeavour, every single player is contributing, or should be at least, to a common goal. The macro view of which can be seen on your ship's galactic war map, showing the gradual movement of the front lines, the planets under threat, the key sector choke points that must be taken or defended, and the thousands, or tens of thousands, or at its peak, hundreds of thousands of Helldivers in action across these battlefields. There is both an element of emergent storytelling with community-led efforts, most famously perhaps the Battle of Malevelon Creek, as well as a broader game master plan being followed behind the scenes at Arrowhead Studios, with story beats like the Meridian wormhole moving towards Super-Earth, and the subsequent Illuminate invasion of humanity's homeworld, an eventuality which I think all players knew had always been on the table, if and when one frontline or another finally collapsed, but was ultimately something planned and triggered in advance to unveil new content, urban megacity maps and whatnot. It has been this drip feeding of new content, enemy factions, map types, war bonds in which new weapons and armors and cosmetics could be ground out for by the ravenous community, which I think has been this game's undoing is maybe too strong of a word, but I can't help but feel for Arrowhead Studios like they're suffering a bit from success here, as their game became far more popular than they expected, and with it, the demands and expectations. So even as I write this, having not touched the game in many a month at least, I am mentally re-engaging with what I did love about it, even getting the itch for the first time in a long time to hop back in. The concept is brilliant, the feeling of collaboration, giving everyone a sense of shared purpose, but this has by necessity turned it into a forever game. A live service with seasonal updates, new outfits to thematically tie in to big story beats the GM has planned, and I don't know, there's just something about it has killed the magic for me. Unless you're cued into the game state regularly, taking a break for months, or even just weeks, can mean returning to a totally alien situation. Sometimes literally. Guess we're defending Earth now. Hop in, have a bunch of exciting games for a day or two, but, eventually get bored, get tired, feel you've seen all the new content the update has to offer. Then, by the time you next feel like hopping in, guess there's now giant worms we're dealing with. Okay. I don't know, that's just where I am with it. Collaborative storytelling is great and all, until you start to feel out of step with the story. FOMO is real, but where it doesn't successfully pressure you into hopping back into the game, it can just disincentivize you from following at all. Like missing one too many episodes of a TV show and just choosing to drop it entirely rather than feeling stuck playing catch-up. As a story-heavy guy myself, knowing there may never be an actual ending, or even worse, I'll simply not be online the day that the ending plays out, is a bigger put-off than you might fully appreciate. The gameplay itself, irrespective of broader community goals, is still, no doubt, a pressure cooker of what'll almost every game turn out to either be some of the most ridiculously hilarious, flat-out epic, or insanely bloody, often all three, multiplayer moments you'll ever have. I suppose just the token explanation for those who don't know, missions will procedurally generate an open world with various sub-objectives and a main target. You know, blow up an automaton Strider factory, essentially an AT-AT walker, rescue civilians trapped in some shuttle port, drill a nuclear warhead into a bug nest, so on, so on, so on. Speed and coordination can mean hitting primary and secondary objectives efficiently and before your super destroyer leaves orbit, which is the real source of your power, calling in stratagems, from orbital strikes to air support to vehicle drops, and of course, replacing fallen comrades. This can then mean if you're stuck on a mission and your timer has run out, you can get in a tricky situation there as you're down to one man, running for your life, waiting for the, what is it, a 60-second counter or something before you can bring in one of your teammates. It's a time. The different playstyles with these stratagems and your personal loadouts leads to a lot of variety. Fast-paced running gunners, jetpack flying flame troopers, anti-armor duty, trench shovel warfare. You know, you gotta be a little goofy with it sometimes. So, Helldivers 2. I'd still argue it was the real game of 2024. You know, Sony controversies, Warbond pricing arguments, wild player count and stream review fluctuations, all aside, it's undoubtedly the most culturally significant game to come out of last year. Or at least within the conversation. You know, when I think back to the games that I played over this, well, more than a year now, year and a half stretch, is it going to be the one that I really hold closest to my heart? No, it's certainly going to be one right on the front of the poster when I think of 2024 in gaming, but it's not quite my favourite. And on that note, I suppose it is time to get to my final 2024 game. Alright, let's get out of our system. Gunner Games! Good. Cool. So, on that note, Reverse Collapse, codename Bakery. If nothing else, perhaps the most fantastically and misleadingly titled entry of 2024, a totally modernised, ground-up remake of 2013's equally fantastically and misleadingly titled codename Bakery Girl. Spoilers, by the way, this is not, in fact, a cozy cake shop simulator featuring adorable militarised robo-girls or anything, but rather a brutally grim, delightfully melancholic, turn-based strategy RPG set during the First Antarctic War of 2092, featuring some adorable militarised robo-girls. And if I could just cut to the chase, I loved it. Now where the hell to begin? Developed by Chinese studio Mica Team, those behind the Girls Frontline universe of mostly mobile games, I was only made aware of this game's existence through the GFL community on Twitter, formerly known as X, which I've so recently found myself immersed in after a kind of hardcore obsessively playing through every major story event in GFL 1 and 2, after having about 7 months to kill stuck in Shanghai with nothing else to play. So, what can I say? They lure you in through the door with the anime gun raifus, but then get you hooked on the existential crises, trauma, and depression. Anyway, putting the gacha game slop aside, Reverse Collapse is a fully offline, single-player, narrative-focused SRPG set in the same continuity, nearly 30 years on from the last game, but a standalone story in and of itself. Emphasis, mind you, on story, since, much like its mobile game counterparts, when we ain't doing tactical turn-based gameplay, we're a full-on visual novel. Fully voice-acted, though not in English, so lots of reading. I did mention this was technically a remake, but reimagining might be more appropriate. The original game being the studio's first foray into interactive media, itself adapting a 2008 purely visual novel, and only barely setting the foundations of lore that Girls Frontline 1, Neural Cloud, GFL 2, that one bad anime adaptation, and a whole ton of written material would run with and expand on over the next decade plus. All this to say that, besides character names and the basic synopsis, it's a drastically different game. Following the events of Operation Bakery, a squad of Antarctic Union special operatives attempt to rescue and extract a mysterious VIP, known only as Bakery, from the Caucasus Mountains, deep within the territory held by the Union of Rosartris Nations Coalition, our friendly neighbourhood New World Order emerging from the ruin and collapse radiation of World War III. After being ambushed and scattered by URNC forces, Antarctican agent Mendo finds a mysterious girl with unusual abilities and equally unusual name, and must work together to complete the mission. So, I can't say I'm super familiar with this sort of game. Never played a Fire Emblem, never played a, Valkyrie Chronicles, loved me some XCOM, and obviously played plenty of full-on RPGs, which just happened to be turn-based, but this highly tactical, ability-centric, tool-centric, highly asymmetric type game took a bit of a learning curve. And it is hard. You start the game trading shots with enemy scouts. Oh no, they're behind sandbags. My chance to hit has gone down a percentage, oh no. But very quickly find the missions will have you outnumbered 30-1 against tanks, mechs, and man-made horrors beyond your comprehension, and it can be overwhelming. But somewhere along the line, something just clicked. Line up just enough one-shot kills with Jeffuri's Mosin Nagant, get a Maginot line of turrets going that mow down the enemy force the second they step in range, or just start combining the, at first quite oppressive arsenal of different gadgets and character abilities in ways that turn a boss fight from, I'm sorry, how much HP? To, lol, a tentacle beat boop. Easily the most valuable mindset change going in is don't hoard your gadgets. If you have grenades, if you have smoke bombs to reduce enemy accuracy, if you have hollow gravel to slow their movement a few tiles, or a cardboard cutout dummy of yourself to distract even one critical enemy hit, don't be afraid to use it. You know, Bethesda games and so many other RPGs have ruined this particular mindset for me. No matter how many dragons I fight, I will never, ever use a potion of resist fire. Not here! Action economy, AP management, buffs and debuffs, awareness of enemy buffs and debuffs, it all just fits so tightly that while it's very easy for one mistake to become a disaster, the inverse is some real satisfying gameplay when you plan things out rounds in advance to get that perfect death ball going. Though, again, I stress, it never stops being a challenge, right the way through to the true final boss, which had me up to 1 AM swearing at Carl for dying to mega cancer right before I needed his damage buff for the final round of attacks. Hell, I'll just say it now. Of the Sunborn Universe Mica Team games that I have played, this is the best actual game, and it's not even close. But I need to talk about the story and how it's told, because that's the whole other side of what made this game so interesting for me, and while I will be avoiding most major plot spoilers, I do have to talk about the main gimmick of the game and why it's so good. So, you know, skip now if you don't want to know. So, back with Agent Mendo and the mysterious bakery girl, who seems to have an almost preternatural insider knowledge on enemy deployments and strategy, evading capture again and again, mission after mission. All seems to be going more or less to plan, when suddenly, ambushed by knife-wielding superhuman clones, and everybody dies. Cut to black, cue opening title, but then, wake up in the shoes of Miss Baked Goods herself, several hours prior, just before the start of the game, with all memory of the previous experience fresh in mind. That's right, it's a time loop, baby! Okay, so I'm a total sucker for a good time loop in fiction. Line that loop with pain, loss, and an iron will determination to carry on regardless, and I'm all in. And so, just as in some of my favourite examples of the trope elsewhere, like finding the pile of bodies at the bottom of the elevator in Signalis, just the entire episode Heaven Sent from Doctor Who, we've stepped into the story, not at the start of the cycle, but an ungodly number of loops into it. reframing Jafuri's decisions and knowledge in the first introductory chapter in a tragic new light. The rest of the game then, broken into 4 chapters with a secret true finale chapter 5 unlocked only after finding a bunch of collectibles, tells and retells the day and a half or so that is Operation Bakery, as Jafuri desperately tries to find that 1 in 14 million timelines where not only she can escape alive, but where every other member of this operation can survive. Members who, through lifetime after lifetime of repeating the same groundhog mission, she's come to know, trust, depend, and, dare we say, love? Fuck, it's good.
But to get what his heart wants most means living this day over again, till he gets it right.
Now, watching a linear story about this concept play out on screen over a 50-minute episode or 90-minute movie is all well and good. Watching a montage of the Doctor punching away at a wall of diamond for 4.5 billion years, or Bill Murray go through a character arc, is one thing. Chapter 4 of Reverse Collapse is another, where after 30 hours of game till that point, the game drops all pretense and says, well, now that you've seen the insurmountable hurdles you're up against, the variables, the stakes, and all the clues, you figure it out. Good luck, as we spend the next 30 plus hours punching away at the single objective, find a way through Operation Bakery. This is, for better or worse, the real meat of the game, as the concept of timeline divergence points, butterfly effects, and intentionally dooming one loop for the sake of passing vital information back in hopes of better preparing those who come after, hits with full force. Now, the double-edged sword here should be pretty obvious. While I've made my love of the time loop trope clear, there is obviously going to be an issue with repetition when we're actually having to play said loops out to completion. You'll be replaying missions intentionally similar to those you've run on prior chapters, or might very well just be forced to replay the same mission again just to try for a different outcome. All things considered though, despite how many times we technically revisit the same events on paper, the divergences are substantial enough, and added story context interesting, that I didn't feel it nearly as draining as I probably should have. You know, like Nier Automata, a personal favourite game of mine, famous for having multiple paths. First time through from 2B's perspective, second time as 9S's. Now, for all the love I have of that game, I will be the first to admit the 9S run is the dipping point for the game as a whole, gatekeeping the real good, wholly new final path, while being neither different enough to feel justified, nor, if we're being honest, is it as fun to play as 9S, with his single weapon slot and constant hacking minigames. Each of Reverse Collapse's chapters, though, despite technically retelling the same day, are comprised of missions made fresh and distinct enough, with maybe the exception of a few stealth missions, to make the whole chapter feel justified. Getting further each time, thankfully brushing over some repeat events with narration, while narratively peeling back more and more of the true scope of the nightmare we're trapped in. The deflation I would feel when hitting a dead end was less about, ah shit, here we go again, well that was a waste of time, but rather genuine upset that I'd put yet another Jafuri through a hopeless run. Both she and I getting our hopes up that this might have been the one, just one, where everybody lives. Godspeed, baked goods girl. Besides the time looping premise, which as far as I know wasn't even in the original game, I enjoyed the story and characters just at face value. Most of our party members are great, though due to both the timeline hopping and the needs of the mission, they aren't necessarily permanently permanent, often swapping in and out. On the upside, this does make a certain mission near the end all the more memorable when you get absolutely everyone to help in a full-on siege defense. But on the downside, this did leave the likes of Jevon, one of our later and more infrequent additions, all but footnoted, saved only by the fact that he has an absolute beast of a secondary weapon. But I did feel like some characters just got sidelined for long stretches, becoming the designated reactors and expositors, only in the scene to explain enemy defenses for the upcoming mission. You know, kind of the Harry Kims of the bakery gang. This is especially felt during the branching, blood-soaked flowchart that is Chapter 4, which didn't seem to have time, space, or the effort for further characterization of Atena and her gaming PC, or even our main man Mendo for a worrying chunk of time. Anyway, all this just to say, Captain Carl's the GOAT.
I'm going with you.
As mentioned, this story is part of an established and heavy, we shall say, continuity. Exactly how much understanding of this is needed for this game, I can't say for sure. It's tricky enough to follow even with a sound grasp of the GFL setting. Relics? Shrike cells? Nirvana? For God's sakes, I just want to bake! But if you're happy with the vibes of Metal Gear or Ace Combat's strange real geopolitics, with the convoluted, pseudo-apocalypto-biblical weirdness of Neon Genesis Evangelion, you could probably get on just fine with this without knowing the first thing about the Neo-Soviet Union or tactical doll technology. But as someone who has been following the broader story, at least in what little way it can be followed, I probably got more out of it than most. The cameos from other games, the soy pointing at screen references to Lanesia, the central villain somehow still being that son of a bitch William. Why is he still alive? Mr. Pizza. Anyway, I did mention stealth missions a bit ago though, didn't I? Okay, yeah, these do seem to be the main thing that people dislike about the game, and yeah, me too. Though never enough to quit or ruin the overall product. Sure, they can be fun, and time to time a totally mechanically different mission will be thrown in as a sort of full-on puzzle segment, but I think the fact that they are just so slow, and the constant restarts because, oh, you didn't account for the searchlight's patrol pattern, drags these down a notch. You know, after spending 80 minutes on one infiltration mission, you're never going to want to see one again. But of course, we're in a time loop, so... With that said though, the game is actually really generous with not just the plentiful autosaves, at least on normal difficulties, but a quick restart turn option letting you essentially Ctrl-Z away any mistakes. I mean, who hasn't accidentally moved someone full AP across the map when trying to select a different party member? Ugh. It's a convenience feature, which prevents an otherwise tight, challenging game from slipping into painful tedium. There are also plenty of difficulty options, with me playing the first half of the game on normal, with a healthy sense of pressure and scrappy, skin-in-the-teeth victories, though did relent to knock it down to casual 1, aware that there was a further casual 2 below that, by the end of Chapter 3. You know, when you're suddenly faced with fighting up a mountain full of enemies, with a split party, while being chased by tanks, where one wasted action in turn 1 could mean spending the next half hour with a cannon up your ass, and I just couldn't bring myself to go through it again from scratch for like a week. But I had to remember, she never gave up. And at this point it was more about getting through the game in a reasonable time frame, or at all, and I could always try again on a more challenging mode when not faced with the prospect of at least 30 more hours of game, and an encroaching 2026. Yeesh. Speaking of, my one and only real negative about this game as a whole, shit does not respect your time. Like I said, 30 to 40 hours gets you to the end of Chapter 3. Repeat that again for Chapter 4 alone. Final save time, including true ending, training missions, and hunting for intel and collectibles, came in at 98 hours for me. Steam clocked in my total at 108. Individual maps can take an hour plus to pass regularly. That final mission, even with a sneaky stealth mission bypass, only time I used one of those, took me at least 2 hours. Now, this isn't bad if we're having fun, but I hate to say, I lost an entire afternoon to the multi-hour penultimate mission when I realised, halfway through the final phase, that I'd left my bloody essential grenades, that's what we call a bit of anti-Shrike humour, at home. Pause game, return to preparation phase, restart mission from scratch. Ugh. And just to give you one final example, never before have I had a video game warn me beforehand to go get some snacks before beginning the next cutscene. 1.5 hours later, of some of my favourite, most heartwarming and heart-wrenching storytelling of the year, mind you, yeah, I'm glad I heeded the advice. God, I've been yapping about this game for way too long. What's even left to say? The music is fantastic, to be expected from Veilguard Sound's ongoing collaboration with the series, from that banger opening title theme to peaceful campfire melodies to some tasty, tasty combat music. And I can't understate how much art direction does to elevate this game. The character designs, both in and out of their cutesy-fied, chibi animated representations, the enemies, the weapons, the armors, the vehicles. I mean, okay, nuts on the table here. There is a reason beyond Goonslop for why I'm so attached to this series at large. Like, I've seen the other big gacha games out there. I've poked my head through the door on your Genshin Zones and your Zenless Impacts. I'm aware of your Nikes and your Azure Knights going for a similar dark, gritty, serious story for serious people with death, war, trauma. Now buy this bikini skin for your jiggly waifu. But at the end of the day, none of that compares to Gorilla Wife Mod 3 AK-15 PNG. It just trumps everything else in terms of pure, unbridled aura. And Baguette Girl's adventure through time carries that same artistic lineage forward. With that, I am actually at the end of things to talk about. Thank fuck, I hear you say. Reverse Collapse, Give a Girl a Pastry for crying out loud, is not exactly a game that I'm broadly recommending. It is so niche and weird and appeals so specifically to the type of sci-fi that I enjoy in tropes and style and setting, also Robo-Girls, that I really can't guarantee anyone listening to this would get anything like what I have from it. But, all that said, in a totally dark horse outcome, I'm calling this my game of 2024. Oh yeah, and Girls Frontline 2 technically released globally in 2024 as well, didn't it? Well, I guess I could quickly review that one too. Goonslop, gacha trash, I'm max level on it. And with that, we are done! Right in time for the Jeff Keighley Awards. Anyway, does this mean I'm going to be resurrecting these end-of-year roundup videos? For now, absolutely. I can't tell you the 2025 video will be done anytime soon, but it will absolutely be out, with several games down already, with footage captured and the reviews in progress. Considering I didn't even begin this video until August or September 25, I can be pretty confident that the 2025 video will be more towards the beginning of the following year and not, you know, bloody December. Anyway, until we get to that, I hope you've enjoyed and gotten something out of everything I've said, and if not, just thanks for indulging me. As I said at the start, I just like talking about games, and I'd love to talk more in the comments section about your thoughts on any of these games if you've played, or anything else from 2024 you wish I might have gotten to. I will say there were certainly 2 games that came up on my radar just recently, but I simply hadn't had the time to fit them in around everything else. You know, really needed to get this video out before the Jeff Keighley Awards was my self-imposed timeline. Crow Country being one of them, Nine Souls being another. I'd still love to get to them at some point. And obviously, I skipped over a lot of the bigger names from last year. There was that Indiana Jones game that looked pretty good, actually. And, you know, a bunch more. But at the end of the day, can't play everything, you know. It costs money. I actually am a normal person. I need to buy these fucking things. I ain't got the magical Game Pass that lets me try every new game that comes out. I ain't one of them elitist, bougie cunts. No. Thanks for watching. Anyway, thanks, and thank you again to my wonderful patrons. That one Turian, Oda Field Glisten, Cheya, Ariana, Jane Neilstone, Araby Ragnarok, Dahan's Wars, Incompetent Gamer, Big Noodle Dave, and Prophet of War. Catch you all in the new year. Even if it is the wrong one. See you later.